Hey, everybody, welcome to the Purple Insider Vikings free agency special. It is time. We are just moments away from the legal tampering period beginning in the National Football League. And if some of you have noticed, there's some social media issues with Twitter being broken, but I've got NFL Network here to my right. I have Blue Sky to my left, which I haven't done a whole lot with, but coming up a little bit clutch right now as a lot of the newsmakers have turned over there. So I guess if you want a Blue Sky account, there's some accounts over there that are tweeting out the news. And if you guys see anything or if your Twitter works, feel free to jump in the comments. I do suggest that you make sure that it's a real account sending it out before you share it to everybody in the comments. But here we are, an exciting day for the Minnesota Vikings. We may get resolution on Sam Darnold, where he's going to go. We may see signings roll in for the Vikings at all the positions we've talked about and all the players we've discussed, how they would fit, where the money is going to go. So much happening. And there are two news items to begin with. I'll start with the one I have less to say about, which is the signing of Ryan Wright, the Vikings punter. So they are bringing back Ryan Wright, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be no competition for Ryan Wright in training camp. That's really all there is to say about that. Ryan Wright has been an average punter over the last 3 years in terms of his total. He was really good in 2022. I thought he fell off a bit in 2023. And last year, just up and down for Ryan Wright. And there's the whole opinion. There's some other free agent punters that maybe they could have gone with. And instead, they're bringing him back. I'm absolutely certain, bringing an undrafted free agent and have that person compete with Ryan Wright, and we'll see where it goes. But one thing to mention with Ryan Wright is that, and this is important, when you have a kicker who has as much talent as Will Reichard, they seem to have a good connection last year, and the holding is an important thing for the punter. So there's the whole opinion on Ryan Wright. Now, Jonathan Allen, this is the more exciting news. Jonathan Allen is going to visit with the Minnesota Vikings, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. And as far as Jonathan Allen goes, a lot of you asked about trading for him when Washington put it out there, hey, we're going to let him seek a trade. And my thing was, that is not really a contract that you can trade for. It's big, and his numbers were not what they were a couple of years ago. But when it comes to a signing, that is different because they can control the price of a signing. So Washington was not able to find a trade partner like so many of those who tried the last ditch. We've given him a chance to go seek a trade. Yeah, he's got an unmovable contract, but that's fine. In this case, they did release Jonathan Allen, and now he is visiting with the Vikings, which, of course, is going to go along with where does he stand physically. Jonathan Allen is 30 years old, so he is not ancient, but his performance over the last 2 years has not been the same as it was from 2020 to 2022. From 2020 to 2022, Jonathan Allen was hands down an elite player in the NFL, one of the best interior rushers in the league. He had as many as 67 pressures in a season, which if you get that many, that's usually at the defensive tackle spot, putting you all the way up the top, unless you're Aaron Donald. And over the last 2 years, he still had success as a pass rusher. And this is why I would be somewhat interested in Jonathan Allen joining the Vikings, because even though he has dipped in terms of his run defense, his tackling grade, things like that have gone down over the last couple of years. So his overall PFF grade has gone down. He is still able to create pressure on the quarterback. He's not getting quite as many sacks as he used to, but can you be some type of impact player for a relatively decent price? So think about last year, our expectation for Aaron Jones. Now, it turned out differently for Aaron Jones, and he was fantastic, but our expectation for Aaron Jones last year was, hey, you got a 30-year-old player who's coming in and maybe splits and is a duo with somebody, and You hope that he brings some percentage of what he used to the table, and that's still a positive for you. That's how I would view Jonathan Allen. Now, of course, Aaron Jones hit a home run, but when you're bringing in older players, it was this way with Patrick Peterson too. The idea of 75% of what that player once was on a very short term and small contract is much better than going out and getting a below average player who maybe is coming off an injury or something like that. That's how I view Jonathan Allen and his potential with the Vikings is even 75% of Jonathan Allen for what he was 2 years ago would still be way better than what the Vikings have brought to the interior defensive line in terms of pressure. If he was a rotational player, even if he had the Jihad Ward role from last year, where Jihad Ward was a rotational rusher that came in on second down and long, came in third down, and was able to create a fair number of pressures, but I don't think he was as good as what you would expect from Jonathan Allen. And I think this also just signifies that the Vikings are very much in on the idea of creating pressure with four. That's the important concept here, that even just bringing Jonathan Allen in, they watch the Super Bowl, you watch the Super Bowl. It is a hack if you can create pressure by not having to blitz. And Brian Flores is always going to be super aggressive. He's always going to want to blitz. But I think that there are some third downs where he would love to just say, go get the quarterback and rush with four and not have to do anything else and dial up some crazy stuff coverage wise instead of always having to go after the quarterback. So Jonathan Allen is that kind of guy. He is coming off an injury. Last year, he still had 26 pressures in 421 total snaps, which is a pretty good number. 2 years ago, he had 49 total pressures. So he's getting into the backfield still and has a good amount of talent, but how much you're going to pay for that is a major question. And Dante bringing up DJ Jones, who was somebody that was on my radar. And I will have to give the speech here about prices at the beginning of the show, that if DJ Jones was bringing in $39 million on a 3-year deal, and DJ Jones is more of a solid all-around defensive tackle, he's not a superstar type of player, that the prices out there for a lot of positions are going to be absolutely enormous. And already, as some of you have mentioned, Khalil Mack coming back at 18 million at his price, and JC Horn signing for 25 million. We're just going to have to recalibrate our brains with the new salary cap that is almost $280 million. I mean, that is that's really crazy. So do we got is the chat down? What is going on with the internet today? What is going on with the internet? The chat just dying out here on me on the page. Hold on, I'll have to pull up the myself here to see you guys in the chat. Okay. Unfortunately, the chat in my window has gone down, but I have it still right here in front of me, and we'll just do it that way. Just everything on the internet exploding now because of NFL free agents. If you didn't already know how much the NFL operated the universe, now I think you have a pretty good sense for it. So let's talk about a few other things that have happened so far. I discussed, Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick just skipping out on last year and then still getting $14 million is okay. Now the chat's working again. Great. So, I mean, just think about like how crazy these numbers are going to be, but there's not that much talent in free agency, and everybody is going after the same couple of players that are all good. So when it comes to some of the other moves, Devontae Adams going to the Rams, that is an enormous one. Very clearly, the Rams have to do stuff like that to go all in. And the Rams next year are going to be a Super Bowl or bust team again. After a couple years ago, 2021, and then they had to rebuild it. And last year, they were pretty close to taking down the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. Stafford comes back to the Rams, and then he's got Puka Nacua. It looks like this means Cooper Kupp must be gone from the Rams, but they get Devontae Adams. He can still play, but maybe not the same level that he used to be. One of those older signings that can still contribute, but just another signal that the Rams are not tearing it down. They're not rebuilding. They're going all in. Khalil Mack staying with the Chargers. Not that that was really something on the Vikings radar at all, but his price, I think, shows you just what kind of dollar figures we're talking about here when it comes to free agency. And Grady Jarrett is on the market now. And the thing about Grady Jarrett, I could call up his numbers as well. Grady Jarrett has not been the same over the last couple of seasons. Last year, he had 34 pressures, played 744 snaps, 62 grade. When he was at his best and totally destroying the Minnesota Vikings, he was grading by PFF in the 90s and getting 50 to 60 quarterback pressures. But that doesn't mean he can't contribute. Like, I feel the same way about Jonathan Allen as I do Grady Jarrett. If someone would pay a ton of money for Grady Jarrett, well, they can have him. I mean, that's not really something you want the Vikings to do. You want them to spend their big money on players who are under 27 or 28 years old, multi-year players. Last year should be very instructive, I think, for how to do it. Where the Vikings last year, they went in and they got players who are in their primes or coming into their primes. In the case of Jonathan Grenard, and they signed Grenard to one of the best contracts in football. After Myles Garrett gets $40 million, it really shows you just how good that contract for Jonathan Grenard really is. And so getting him at kind of a high price at $22 million a year last year, which seemed like a little risky at the time because he only had 1 year as a top-notch pass rusher, but then that ends up paying off huge dividends. So you're kind of looking for the same thing today for the Vikings to go into free agency and try to get players who can be here over multiple years. And you mentioned Will Fries is someone that has been brought up a lot. It's probably the top target overall for the Vikings on the offensive line. That's somebody who's not very old, who could be here for a 4-year contract, if not longer than that, with a guard. You're looking to solidify positions for a long time. And when you talk about the drafting and they haven't hit on this player or that player, but if you could sign young-ish or in their prime players to multi-year contracts, it does make up some of the difference. Dwayne keeping me updated here that Jalen Moore, former 49er, has signed a $30 million deal for 2 years, which with the Chiefs. Well, I mean, again, that tells you, I'm not even familiar with his game. That tells you just how much money is going to be thrown around today. No surprise, Chris Godwin is going back to the Tampa Bay Bucks. That's been another theme so far, is that players are mostly signing with their own teams, that they haven't really tested the market. Chris Godwin getting 3 years, $66 million. He's been a good player. He's been banged up. Tampa Bay clearly trying to keep it together with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and continuing to be a competitive team in the NFC South. I think that they're just kind of another team in the league that can make the playoffs, but doesn't have much higher of a ceiling. And bringing back Chris Godwin's good for them. It's probably infuriating to all the other fan bases that talked about it. But there's another thing too here with Chris Godwin, who's a little bit older and a little bit broken down, and the price he got, and the expected price for Jamar Chase, and also the DK Metcalf trade, which I want to talk about. It all just points to Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, Jonathan Grenard, the big contracts. I'm sorry. You guys are funny. Talk me into Jalen Moore being an actual person. Honestly, was not that familiar with him. So, maybe he's not. I think I've seen enough reporting that he is. But when you look at those contracts that they sign now, with the way that this has gone up with the salary cap and the way the prices have exploded, Justin Jefferson last year, there's talk about, and not from anyone inside the Vikings, of course, or not anyone covering the Vikings, of course, but talk on the outside and within fans. Like, oh, should we trade Jefferson? If you pay him too much, you won't be able to afford him. And then 1 year later, now all of a sudden, DK Metcalf is getting almost as much as Justin Jefferson. And in my opinion, those two things are nowhere close. I think Justin Jefferson is far better of a wide receiver than DK Metcalf. A couple of your questions. Any steam on Mekhi Becton? That I don't know, because there is a connection with the new assistant offensive line coach that apparently is not a positive connection. Becton was a guy that I thought would have been a really good fit, but if there is an issue between those two from the past, then that seems less likely that that's going to happen. How did DJ Reed grade out last year? DJ Reed didn't quite grade out, I can call it up, as good as he did 2 years ago. I think some of that was the New York Jets maybe firing their defensive-minded head coach. Probably not the best idea when they did it for Robert Saleh, but still really good. I mean, DJ Reed is one of my favorite targets here. We just have to understand that that's going to cost a lot of money looking at what JC Horn was just able to bring in. He graded a 70 last year, which is solid. He has been so consistent over his career, from Seattle to the Jets, even when he was with San Francisco. But when he was with Seattle, he was grading consistently among the upper tier. I mean, you think about it, how many corners play in a season? It's got to be 120 corners play per season. And DJ Reed was grading among the top 10% of that and has continued to do it. Slipped just a little bit last year. I think penalties was part of it. Maybe penalties even in the Vikings game. But think about this for DJ Reed. This is why he's one of my favorite targets. He has never allowed in a full season a quarterback rating and throws in his direction over 91. So he also is more of the man coverage type of player. That's somebody that I really like. We got another punter signing here. J.K. Scott. Oh, there's a punter target off the list. So, but just to circle back, the fact that Chris Godwin, who has been banged up and who has, struggled, is getting $20 million a year. The fact that DK Metcalf is getting $30 million a year. I mean, that really, really tells you that Justin Jefferson's contract is tremendous. It's an excellent contract at this point, and the way that they were able to work around it to make it so it's not that expensive early on. The update, by the way, on Aaron Jones, I guessed last night that his first year cap hit would be 4.5. It's 4.8. So there was a lot of Aaron Jones, they overpaid, and then his cap hit for this year is $4.8 million. And if they move on from him next year, I think they'll have a dead cap of maybe $5 million or something, or they can restructure his deal always and forever. It's going to look a little different than the number and the dollars. And that is another PSA for today as we talk about these signings, is whatever comes out first. The player X has signed for Y dollars. I am getting the Twitter updates now. I don't know if it's actually working or just they made sure Adam Schefter's is working, so they're sending to my phone. So anyway, you're always going to see these big numbers. This player signed X for Y, but a lot of times those are pumped up numbers as much as the agent can make it seem. And it's not always the structure and the reality of the deal. The guaranteed dollars matter more, but they're harder to process and what it actually means. So I think that we have to be careful about sticker shock when we finally do see here. And I say finally, we're 15 minutes into this, when the Vikings do make signings and so forth. We should at some point get some sort of update on what is going to happen at the Vikings quarterback position. But I feel like the quarterback position became a little anticlimactic. It seemed like it was all kind of leading up to today, and there was a lot of insider reporting. Maybe Darnold will return. You could see a Darnold return, and the Vikings are trying to work on something with him. And then right after Geno Smith was traded, there were so many reports that Sam Darnold was going to become a Seattle Seahawk that you just sort of shrug like, oh, well, okay. I guess he's becoming a Seattle Seahawk. And I know, of course, that it's really significant that he would be leaving and going somewhere else after a 14-win season, but it took away the drama of, hey, we all find out today, right? Like, I think we already found out, and Adam Schefter and multiple people reported that Sam Darnold is not going to come back to the Vikings, which is what I thought was going to happen after the combine from everything I had heard. And then all the insider reporters were saying that he could come back. And my brain was not processing why that would be the reporting. But I thought, well, maybe something changed on my flight home. I don't know. But now I guess we'll see. I did think last night, though, if you're Sam Darnold, and I think we can all agree on this, that if you're a Viking fan, you should want nothing but the best for Sam Darnold. You should want him to go to a good place. You should want him to succeed, because that guy came in as the bridge quarterback and provided a really fun season for this team. And just think about the throw in Seattle, the game against the Falcons. Like a lot of good football was played by Sam Darnold. So you should want him to go have a good situation somewhere else and succeed, because he put his name in that list of all the Viking quarterbacks of the past that have come through, for like the Jeff Georges and the Case Keenums. And I think that there's a really special place for those players in Vikings fans' hearts, right? And so Darnold should be that way. If he goes to Seattle, I think they're in tough a little bit. They have Jackson Smith-Njigba, but they've traded DK Metcalf. They do have a lot of draft capital. They could rebuild around him the same way that maybe Detroit did, in a less super tanky kind of way, but only a mild tanky kind of way. But I did wonder if, and I saw there's some reporting today that Justin Fields is maybe going to go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you're Sam Darnold, you've got to consider, if the Steelers are interested, going and playing with George Pickens and DK Metcalf as a downfield type of passing quarterback. I am seeing now that Drew Dalman is signing with the Chicago Bears. So that means that the Bears now have acquired, and this should be no surprise with Ben Johnson as their head coach, that they have now traded for Jonah Jackson, traded for Joe Thuney, and signed Drew Dalman. That is the interior offensive line that the Vikings fans really wanted, right? Okay, 3 years, $42 million from Adam Schefter on Drew Dalman. I also have been interested that there's really no steam, if you will, for the Vikings doing anything except for having Garrett Bradbury as their center. I guess we'll see if that changed. But, with Drew Dalman, he was really the only needle mover as a center, and now he signs with the Chicago Bears. But my intern, Clay, wrote an article, and I helped him with the data a little bit over at purpleinsider.football about how much the improvements on the interior offensive line for the Bears are going to actually help Caleb Williams. Now, it's going to help their run game, because they just went out and got one of the better run blocking centers in the entire NFL in Drew Dalman. And Jonah Jackson, that's his thing. And look at their coach, Ben Johnson. And this is how things change in a yearly basis, right? Last year, the Bears didn't have a difference-making line when it came to run blocking. I think as far as their pass blocking went, they were mostly fine, except the quarterback, Caleb Williams, held onto the ball for way too long. And that's what all the numbers show, that it was concerning how often Caleb Williams was causing his own pressure and his own problems. So I don't think that Drew Dalman, who has not graded that well as a pass blocker, or Jonah Jackson, who is not graded that well as a pass blocker, I don't think that either one of those guys change what's going to happen with Caleb Williams. He's either going to get rid of the ball or he's not. He's either going to figure out how to run an offense, which for Ben Johnson, you have to run the offense. You see Jared Goff being really good at it, running play action, using the intermediate areas of the field. Like, those are things that Caleb Williams is going to have to do. But these offensive line acquisitions, now Thuney is one of the elite pass blockers. So, but Tevin Jenkins was also really good at pass blocking too. These acquisitions do not change the ability to pass block that much for the Chicago Bears. What they do is they increase their ability to run the football. And you know that coming over from Detroit, Ben Johnson is going to want to run the ball a lot. And this is something that should be concerning for the Vikings, that they're going to have a coach who has a system that has beat them in the past, and that now their interior offensive line is going to be as good as it gets in terms of run blocking. A lot of folks are saying, just looking at the reaction over here on social media, that Drew Dalman is not worth that kind of contract and so forth. And that's probably true as a run blocking specialist. But the Bears have the cap space and they have the coach that's going to run the football. So it's probably a good acquisition within the context of the Chicago Bears and their current situation. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think that some of the reactions on, Garrett Bradbury, no team is serious about winning if it starts Garrett Bradbury. I think that's probably too harsh. I've talked about Bradbury way more than I want to talk about a center on the show over the years because he was a first round draft pick. But just one time, I would be maybe curious to see uh, Garrett Bradbury with the same offensive line next to him and quality guards. I think for his entire career, the Vikings have been patchworking the guard positions around Garrett Bradbury. And I know that he's not an exceptional pass blocker. And he's had better years under Kevin O'Connell than he did earlier in his career. And he's going to get pushed back by defensive tackles. But I think a lot of the issues at the end of last year were just confusion. Who's blocking who? Can you pick up stunts? Can you pick up twists? Things going on up front. And if the Vikings were to add some beef at the guard position, I think that you can be fine at that spot with Garrett Bradbury. Now, long term, next contract, you should look upgrade. But the thing about the center position is that when teams have a really good center, they don't often let that person go. And even if you look at on paper someone like Drew Dalman, because I know through this process, a lot of fans were saying, oh, the Vikings should cut Bradbury, they should sign Drew Dalman, and that kind of thing. But you look at them on paper and it's not a huge difference. Dalman grades out better. He's a little bigger when it comes to run blocking, but the pass blocking is still an issue. There's just not that many centers in the league who are going to be super stout when it comes to the pass blocking part of it. That's just the reality of that position. It's usually a smaller and a quicker position. So with Bradbury, I think that if they did sign two of the bigger guards in the league, that maybe you're talking about a little bit better performance because he would have something around him. And I really think of this a lot. I was looking at Kevin Zeitler's grades. He's a free agent that I am intrigued by because Zeitler's in his mid 30s, but he could still play. And Zeitler started to slip a little bit with his grades. And that's how the Lions were able to get him so cheap. And then last year, he graded like he was one of the best linemen in the entire league. And I think what that shows you is that offensive linemen impact each other. And we saw that last year at left guard from Blake Brandel. Now, some of you have argued that maybe Blake Brandel should come back and should continue to be the left guard. And I don't totally disagree because he was playing well with Christian Darrisaw there. And when Christian Darrisaw went down, his play went down. I would prefer that they spent a lot of money on the right guard and the left guard, and they loaded that thing up with the best possible talent. But there are some limitations to what you can do in the interior offensive line. Dahlman is off the board. Tooney and Jackson both get traded to the same spot. Trey Smith gets taken off the board pretty early because of free agency. So now you are left with guys like, Drew Dalman getting huge contracts and stuff like that. And Will Fries, who has been a good player, but has not been an elite player throughout the years. He's been a pretty good player who's ascending and getting better, but I don't think that he is somebody who is a complete crazy game changer. And he might get paid like that because of how sparse things are on the offensive line. And the Vikings may have to consider looking at the 24th overall pick or wherever they would trade down to at the guard position. So let's say they only sign one guard and then look to the draft. That might be a better idea, as much as some of their draft picks have not gone right in the offensive line on the interior recently. But when I look at a Gray Zabel, I know Tyler Booker didn't have a very good combine, but he's still a good prospect. There are some players who, Kelvin Banks from Texas, who is a tackle, but has said he's willing to play guard. And a lot of people have kind of pointed to him playing guard. Even it would be crazy if Will Campbell dropped the LSU tackle, but if he's a guard, then maybe it's possible. Like there's more options coming out of the draft than I thought there were going to be, because a lot of those tackles, like me, don't have the longest wingspan. And the short-armed heroes like myself, I don't know if you could see them, they're not long. Those guys end up getting pushed into guard. And now that guard is going to be a position that's getting paid as high as it is, then you're going to see tackles more willing to do it, coming out and saying, okay, you know what? I don't mind being a guard. Those guys are getting $20+ million a year. Let's go. So I think that might be the smartest plan, even if there's other things at the 24th overall pick that I would like the Vikings to do, which is that Derek Harmon, is out there as well. But there are, as Dwayne says here in the comments, there are some guys. Patrick McCarthy is an interesting one. Zeitler, Brandon Scherf could still play. Will Hernandez is somebody that I've looked at. So Aaron Banks is the one that I don't love, because there's just not a lot of evidence that Aaron Banks is good. Like, Aaron Banks is large. We got a move here. We got BJ Hill, one of my favorite targets off the board, signing with the Cincinnati Bengals. So re-signing with his own team. So he's going to stay there. BJ Hill was a guy that I thought, was a good target for the Vikings. But ultimately ends up staying with his team. And we've got a lot of that. There's just been a lot of that so far in this free agency period of, these guys signing and staying with their team. So BJ Hill is off the board. This might be more motivation to sign somebody like Jonathan Allen. But just kind of circling back to that point with the guards, that when you throw those names out there, and I like those guys as short-term fillers, a Will Hernandez, a Zeitler, a Brandon Scherf. But if it's Aaron Banks, I saw a report that Aaron Banks was going to break the banks, if you will. And I just don't really like that idea when we're talking about, I was reading Brandon Thorne, and he does the offensive line stuff. He has a great newsletter where he breaks down offensive line, things like that, trench warfare. And I was reading his rankings, and he had Aaron Banks as, I think, the 12th best offensive lineman in this free agent crop, which is not inspiring to pay somebody $20 million. And he is young, and he could, but young-ish. We have a big enough sample size with a similar type of offense to make me think that's not going to be a massive upgrade from somebody like Blake Brandel. If you put the two next to each other on paper, their size, what they've done as far as their PFF grades and their performance, it looks very, very similar. And if I can't find a significant upgrade there, then I don't want to pay that X number of dollars. There was a report that the Vikings could be interested. That would be one where I would say, that might be a little bit rich for my blood. Javon Kinlaw going to the Commanders. Okay. Javon Kinlaw was another one that I was kind of interested in, not super interested in, but just kind of, for the Vikings as a low dollar signing. I don't know. I'll have to see what Kinlaw ends up getting here, but something that, maybe is not a huge investment. That kind of player is somebody that I think the Vikings can use. So he ends up going to the Commanders, replacing Jonathan Allen there. And, I think as a rotational player, as Jeff says, as a rotational player for Jonathan Allen, I think he could be a good piece, but only pay for it that way. Only pay for Jonathan Allen to be that kind of player. Javon Kinlaw being one of the first signings is not something that I had on the bingo board. I'm not surprised that Drew Dahlman, but hey, what's the biggest sign, the first big signing? Like, well, the Vikings kept their punter and Javon Kinlaw went to the Commanders. Decent year for him last year. Hunter asking what the plan is at cornerback after JC Horn signed his deal today, $25 million a year. The prices are definitely getting pumped up for corners. And I know we're going to say that a lot, but I think that when we're talking about like what they're going to do with certain players, we have to ask, all right, it's fine to throw around your money, but how much of it do you want to throw around? Who do you want to throw it at? And do you want to throw $20 million a year at DJ Reed? I think DJ Reed is close to somebody you want to throw $20 million a year at. And if he's close, then you should very highly consider it. I will be curious too. I think we've all written off the idea that Byron Murphy could come back. I don't think that's over. We're already seeing some players. Wait, Javon Kinlaw got 45 million. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm sticker shock guy now. Javon Kinlaw got 3 years, 45 million. Whoa. So now I'm back to drafting a defensive tackle. Whoa. Trade down, get a guard, get a defensive tackle. Holy cow. 15 million a year for a guy who just was a bust in San Francisco and got 4.5 sacks last year. 4.5 sacks is worth 15 million a year, huh? I think DJ Reed's pressing 20 now. And this is probably the reason that Byron Murphy Jr. decided to test the market to see if he could get in that range. And I'm sure when Byron Murphy Jr. woke up today and he saw that JC Horn just got $25 million a year, that Byron Murphy Jr. was like, okay, it's a great day to be great, I guess. And that's very likely why the Vikings weren't able to re-sign him. I know that they wanted him to come back, but if his price was up in that type of ballpark, that would be a little too rich for their blood, even with the salary cap space that they have. So I do think, I don't know what Stephon Gilmore's plans are going to be. My guess, though, is just getting a sense from being around Stephon Gilmore last year. I don't think he's going to make a decision until August. I think he'll decide who he's going to play for in August. It worked out just fine for him to stay in shape all summer and then come in as a mercenary for a couple $1,000,000. So if he's going to play, I think that's exactly how he's going to do it this year. Let's see, where does imagine what's going on in Milton Williams' head. Right. Adam Butler re-signed. That was one of my guys that I thought would be an interesting fit for the Vikings. Milton Williams is another one where, wow, Kinlaw's was 30 million guaranteed. Wow. So, right. I mean, it's gotta be a lot better for Milton Williams, who just had an incredible Super Bowl, that if Milton Williams can play at that level and create as much pressure as he did and be as much of a problem for offensive linemen, that if Kinlaw's getting 15, that's well over, it has to be well over $20 million a year for Milton Williams. And he's going to be a top target of a lot of teams. I'm sure the Vikings are going to have that conversation. So what the Vikings have to do is they have to say to themselves, where are we going to overspend? Like, which position is worth too much money to give to? Guard is probably one of them because of the scarcity. I'm not sure that defensive tackle is with this draft. I think you have to look at the Aaron Jones contract and be like, I know these aren't running backs, but just, okay, that's a pretty fair, reasonable dollar figure compared to what free agents are getting. And I don't know what his interest would have been elsewhere, but you're right. Yes, it's probably Kinlaw's familiarity with the leadership in Washington, but still, I mean, to go first day on that guy with that much money and set the bar there, 30 million guaranteed, 15 a year, that really says, and even BJ Hill signing after, or maybe a few minutes before Kinlaw might have been, hey, wait a minute. Because I think BJ Hill's deal was $10 million a year over 3 years. And that was something that I thought the Vikings might be interested in. But I guess BJ Hill wants to continue to be a Cincinnati Bengal, as some people have said, but how about throw that out there? While we wait and while we have these conversations, we could circle back to the quarterback situation. I wrote about JJ McCarthy today over at purpleinsider.football and would be pleased if you read that for why the Vikings can be confident that JJ McCarthy is going to be their guy going forward. I could talk a little more about the one big news item so far, which is Jonathan Allen visiting the Vikings. But who would you overspend on? Give me that in the comments. If you're going to overspend either a position or a free agent, we could talk about, because we now already know these prices are crazy high, but the Vikings have cap space. So it's not like, I mean, you got to spend it. You go into the store, just think about this. Like, I don't know a lot of high-end store. I don't shop at a lot of high-end stores. Louis Vuitton or something. What is that a thing? But how about just, it's like going to the mall. Okay. I love going to the mall. But if you go to the mall to shop, you're paying more for a sweater than you would if you went to Target. And part of it is the experience of shopping at the mall. You're overpaying, but that's okay because that's what you went there to do. And you've got the money. It's like, how about this? If someone gave you a gift card to the mall for $500 and you're like, well, you got to spend it at the mall. Like, okay, well, maybe they don't have everything I want and I got to overspend, but someone just gave me this money. Like they've been given the cap space. You've got the cap space. So who are you going to overspend on? And where is it the smartest to overspend? Also Aaron Rodgers. Well, he's trying so hard, isn't he? I just saw another report here about the Steelers getting close. Is that from Aaron Rodgers or is that from just like an actual report? I don't know if it's from an actual reporter or if Aaron Rodgers is just telling everyone that he's close to signing with people. Man, I wish them the best if they decide to do that. Just signing the deal with the devil. All right, let me get some of your ideas here. Where to overspend on? Overspend on Cam Bynum? Well, now that they signed Theo Jackson back, are they doing that? I don't know if they're doing that after signing Theo back. I am interested if safety's on their radar, though. One thing we don't know is what Harrison Smith's doing. It's kind of relevant. I mean, they could bring in somebody else. Just the way that this defense works, you could still have Theo Jackson, Josh Metellus, Trayvon Moehrig, Javon Holland. You could have all those guys because Brian Flores is going to be able to do it along with Harrison Smith, but it would be nice for them to get an answer. So is this report really real that the Steelers are getting close with Aaron Rodgers? Wow. Okay. It really shows you desperation when we're going to see what happens with Sam Darnold. So I could end up being wrong about this, but when Darnold had those 2 games at the end of the year, all I saw was Darnold just lost himself a ton of money. And I don't know, man. People are signing Aaron Rodgers still. He's won 13 of his last 34 games. And yet clearly the Steelers are panicking. They got tired of winning 10 games and being eliminated very quickly, but going with Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. That sounds just like what the Jets did. We've got a good defense. Okay. Good luck. All right. So overspending on Bynum. Yeah, overspent. Like if Bynum wants to come back, I mean, he's a good player. And I've always been on the side of Cam Bynum because he brings a high IQ. He is healthy. And something we always have to consider big time with free agents and where you're spending your money is that Cam Bynum is younger and he's healthy and he's a great culture guy and he's going to bring a lot to the room. And now that we're seeing all these people getting overpaid, maybe it doesn't feel as crazy because the number that I tossed out there for potential for Bynum was like 15 million. And now we're seeing all these numbers where guys are coming in that aren't even good, like Javon Kinlaw at 15 million. So if that's what they ended up giving Bynum and keeping it together, when you win 14 games of a top 5 defense, it's not hard to convince me to keep people around. DJ Reed, really like him. He's still in his prime. How old is he? He's 28. So that would be like a 3-year type of contract. But if you paid 3 years and 20 million a year for him, then I think that's a good overspend. I would agree with that. Will Fries and DJ Reed, those seem to be the two top targets. Paulson Adebo is one that I really want to find out what his market actually is, because 2 years ago, Paulson, and we're going to say this a lot on a lot of these free agents, 2 years ago, Paulson Adebo is one of the exciting young emerging corners in the league. And I remember going into the game, the one where Josh Dobbs actually shredded the New Orleans Saints, but going into that game and talking about, hey, this Paulson Adebo kid is making plays left, right, and center. And then he gets hurt last year, and he's put out videos of himself doing backflips and all sorts of stuff to show that he's healthy. That's a good bet to me, because what I like, and I'll look up his age right now. What I like in free agency is, even if someone is getting overpaid, yeah, he's not even 26 years old. Paulson Adebo, I would absolutely overpay for. Even more so than DJ Reed, I think. I think Reed's a better player right now, but somebody who's 26 years old, if you're giving them a 4-year contract, you're getting the whole rest of their prime. That's the Jonathan Grenard contract is instructive. Overpaying for someone, betting on them coming into their prime, rather than getting someone who is 28, 29, whose team is letting them go, or who's choosing not to stay. Steve says overpay on a number one corner and number one guard. Well, there's only one right guard spot. So if you're the starter there, it's different than the one corner. There are very few number one corners. There are very few number one corners that are true number ones. Reed is close, but he even wasn't with his own team because that was Sauce Gardner. Reed was better last year than Gardner, but Gardner's the guy there. Charvarius Ward has been that in past years. Is he still that? I don't know. Jacob says, what available guards would you be okay with overspending on? I think I would be really okay with overspending on an old guy for 1 year. So overspend $12 million for Kevin Zeitler. Okay. Like something like that. Brandon Scherf. How about, $12 to $14 million for a year of him? That, in my mind, is a good idea. And if you're talking about getting the top guy in free agency, Will Fries, okay. But what we have to all agree on, if they sign Will Fries for $15 million or something like that, I mean, we got a corner signing, Jordan Lewis to the Jaguars. Okay. And he's going to be the highest paid nickel corner in the league. Okay. Jordan Lewis has been very up and down for Dallas for the last few years. So if you're paying Will Fries, we all have to agree though that he's not going to meet the contract number, that he's going to be a good guard, but he's not going to be worth whatever they give him. I think in some of these corners, they could be. Paulson Adebo could be. He could be worth the overpay. Fries over a couple of years could also end up being fine and land in the middle of his position in terms of pay, like 3 years down the road, if you sign him to something like a 4-year deal. All these are kind of considerations as we just break down the, like, oh, it just got the number in and this is what he signed for. And that's going to be, but we all have to agree to not set the bar as in every time the guy allows a quarterback pressure, we go, they spent this many of dollars on him. How dare he? Like you're going to have to make sure you're reasonable about the expectations. Evan says, is Bynum going to take 15 million anymore? I don't know. With the prices that are out there, there is a decent chance that he gets even more than that, but I don't know how high the bar is going to go, because the thing is that there are a lot of safeties that are very good. Justin Reed, Javon Holland, Trayvon Moehrig, and Bynum might be the fourth safety. So it is plausible that Bynum could go to the market and find out, no, actually those other guys are the ones who are getting crazy overpaid. And it's not going to be you. You're a second wave type of signing. Now, I have heard some teams who have talked about Cam Bynum do have him high on their list, but I don't know if Cam Bynum is going to get quite as much as some of those other guys. How long is the stream going? So my plan was to go for a couple hours at the beginning of free agency and then do a recap show live tonight. But I make the rules, so I'll just kind of keep going until something happens. Because right now, We don't really have anything happening with the Vikings. And so my plan was, hey, couple hours when it first starts, couple hours later on, and then we'll see where it goes. The only thing we have right now, and I can circle back and talk about it again, is Jonathan Allen visiting the Vikings, not signing, but visiting with the Vikings. But again, no real rules. So I could end up sitting here for more than that if we get some news and things are getting exciting. So we'll just see how it goes. We're just playing it by ear here. Benjamin with the super chat. Thank you, my friend Ben. Rodgers getting a job before Darnold is pathetic. I think we all are pretty sure that Sam Darnold is going to be a Seattle Seahawk, that they've already got something worked out there. It really seemed quite definitive when Geno Smith was traded that the reason they were able to trade Geno Smith was because Sam Darnold is going to the Seahawks. So I think Darnold does have something there, and they just have to work out the details. Jimmy Garoppolo going back to the Rams as a backup quarterback. Good for him. Good for Jimmy working out a backup journeyman quarter. He's now got a really nice journeyman career. And I respect journeyman. So he's got the Patriots to the 49ers to the Raiders to the Rams. It's pretty good. Did Paulson Adebo sign? I have not seen that. Someone said he's signed, but I haven't seen that pop up. I feel like that's going to be a big one. It was Jordan Lewis who just signed with the Jaguars. Matt would overpay for Adebo and Carlton Davis. Carlton Davis is another one who's really good. Yeah, I know, Scott, my guy, BJ Hill re-signed with the Bengals. I think he signed for cheap. Why do people love the Bengals? Those guys, everybody seems to want to stay. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, BJ Hill stays there. Trey Hendrickson was saying the other day that he wanted to stay, and they just won't pay up. Maybe because a lot of those guys went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. But I think BJ Hill took a very reasonable deal that would have been nice for the Vikings. As far as overpays, Jonathan Allen is a guy that I would not overpay. I would want, he's visiting, as we'll talk about in just a second. I'm reading your overpays. Ron would overpay for Byron Murphy. I think when you look at it now, if some of these other guys fall, if DJ Reed goes somewhere, if Paulson Adebo goes somewhere, that now there's a report that Denver is working on a deal for Hufanga, who's the safety from San Francisco. I am very curious to see what he gets. If he is the first safety off the board, what kind of money that he gets, because that will relate to what Cam Bynum is going to get. So who else would you overpay for? Yeah, now is a good time. Great point, William. Now is a good time. A lot of new people joining the stream. Welcome. This is our special here with, hold on, let me put it back up. There it is. Free agency, Vikings free agency special. And I'm so happy to be broadcasting with you guys today, coming along for the ride, breaking down every move, talking about what's going on around the league, how it impacts the Vikings. And let me circle back to where I started the show, which was the first rumor of the day that we got. That was that Jonathan Allen is visiting the Vikings. So let me make that clear. That doesn't mean that he is signing at this moment. It just means that he is visiting the Vikings. And when I look at what Jonathan Allen has done over his career, his age, the injury history, and where he's at, I think that it pretty clearly signifies a short-term, if not 1 year type of contract for him, maybe 2, depending on how you want to make that work. But I wouldn't want more than a 2-year contract for him. And I also wouldn't want Jonathan Allen to be the reason you don't draft someone or the reason you don't bring out someone else in. You don't want Jonathan Allen at 30 years old, coming off of 2 seasons that have declined over the last couple of years. And I'll read you the numbers here in a second that show that. You don't want to make him the whole answer. And they are developing some players for sure on the interior. They have developed Jalen Redmond. I'm interested in him. They're developing Levi Drake Rodriguez, who I've continued to hear good things about. Got in the game against Seattle last year and immediately impacted a couple plays, but we're talking about somebody who's a 7th round pick and is developing, an undrafted free agent who's developing, usually with defensive tackle. you do have to put down the dollars or put down the draft capital. I would prefer for their plan at defensive tackle to be to sign one guy and then to draft someone, either in the first or the third round, or depending on how they trade down. I think you want someone young, explosive, who could get in the backfield, and then the veteran who knows how to do it. And Brandon Thorne, again, I'm a big fan of his from Trench Warfare. He tweeted out some video of Jonathan Allen over the last 2 years rushing the passer. Clearly still has the technique, clearly still has the power, but when somebody only plays 400 snaps last year and their numbers decline at 30 years old, that's very risky to start to put a bunch of money into that player. So his grades over the last 2 years dropped from in 2022, and you remember how much he crushed the Vikings that year. In 2022, he graded over 80 by PFF, and he had 3 straight years that were great. One of them included 67 quarterback pressures, which was elite that year. And last year was when he saw a pretty serious decline in his tackling and his run defense, but was still grading well as a pass rusher. That's 2023, I mean. And in 2024, he got hurt. He only played 420 snaps. 26 pressures is still pretty good. Pass rush grade was above average, but when you start talking about a 30-year-old player and you have to go back to, hey, 2 years ago he was great. Hey, 3 years ago he was great. That's not really what you're looking for spending any sort of big money. Based Gyron says they need a nose tackle in the draft. Yeah, I do like that idea of getting the big giant fat guy. They don't have that. Harrison Phillips isn't really that. Because they've done such a good job against the run with the way that they've set up their interior. I've thought more about the getting into the backfield and rushing the passer has been more of the emphasis. Although what you really want, and this is why Derek Harmon is so interesting in the draft, what you really want is somebody who's playing 3 downs. That's why I liked BJ Hill, because even though he's not this crazy explosive freak show, he is more of a 3 down type of player. And that's what we're looking for. Bradley says Will Fry's close to signing here. Okay, well, the Twitter is not working. So there's always the rumors between what's fact and what's actually happening versus what's kind of being thrown out there by certain people. I saw Will Fry's at the airport, used to be the whole joke, that kind of thing. So as far as rumors of people saying this and that and the other thing might happen, I'm usually going to stick to what has happened or what we actually know, rather than the, hey, whatever random person on Twitter or now Blue Sky, I guess, said something. I saw, Scott, that Jordan Lewis, the cornerback, signed. I'm curious about how much money he got. He's not one of the top names, but it does with every signing, we start to get a little bit more of the picture. Dwayne says that it's frustrating to see the Bears signing all these guys with the Vikings silence. Well, they've only been silent for 55 minutes here. So we'll see what they do. It hasn't even been an entire day. It hasn't even been an entire hour, I should say, yet so far. But as far as the Bears go, you knew they were going to do this. When we go into free agency, this is what happens every year. When we go into free agency, every other team is also trying to do everything they can do to win. I think that the Bears have improved themselves on the interior offensive line in terms of run blocking significantly. I don't know how much they've actually made themselves an incredible, unstoppable offensive line. I think it's better. I think Dahlman is probably one of the more overrated players that was out there based on his numbers. He was more looking like a Garrett Bradbury as far as his pass blocking. Now he's better, but he looks a little bit more like a Garrett Bradbury, was a good run blocker and not as much of a pass blocker. So here's the numbers on Jordan Lewis, a 3-year contract worth $30 million. So that's pretty reasonable. Oh, Paulson Adebo's signing, huh? I haven't seen that one yet. Who's got that one? Now that our social media is broken, I've got Blue Sky over here. I've got NFL Network over here. I've got people texting me. Kevin Seifert texting me that Dan Orlovsky wants the Vikings to get Jameis Winston. Oh, yeah. Asante Samuel is a good name for the Vikings, but $10 million for Jordan Lewis, a veteran proven corner, maybe doesn't set the bar crazy high. That's probably the first one that we've seen where we go like, okay. So let me know where the Paulson Adebo news is, but if he is off the list, then not not great for the Vikings there, because that was one of my top targets for them. I think that Adebo. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, Rappaport. I've got it. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Paulson Adebo. So there you go. One of the top guys that I thought would have been good for the Vikings is off the board in Paulson Adebo. And that's another one that is going to tell us a lot. Okay. Diana Rossini is now I'm sitting here asking, is Diana Rossini on Blue Sky? She has to be, right? There she is. Okay. Let's see. Following Diana Rossini. I made a Blue Sky account a while ago because everybody was doing it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll use this. And I haven't really. But now today it's coming in clutch just because Twitter has completely broken. And we've got, NFL Network is always a little bit slower on TV because they have commercials and stuff like that. So, okay, Rappaport reported. Yeah, okay. Paulson Adebo being gone is disappointing because I think DJ Reed is the top target for me for the Vikings. They're looking for somebody to play man coverage. They're looking for somebody that brings a physical nature. And Adebo was a little bit more of I think Trayvon Diggs makes most sense to people, where make plays on the football, take risks, sometimes give up big plays, but sometimes pick passes off. Like that's Paulson Adebo, but he's just explosive and an exciting player. Whereas DJ Reed is much more of a kind of hard nose, very physical. He's going to get called for penalties, but he's also going to be somebody that people don't want to play against, that kind of thing. Matt says, worried the Vikings are forced into drafting a corner with their first pick. You see a free agent corner where they don't have to go that route with their first pick. Yeah, over these next few hours, days, we're going to, I think, get a much better sense for where they're going in the draft. If they sign two corners in the next 10 minutes, well, then probably corner won't be their top pick. But think about it this way, though, because you said it, the way that you framed it, Matt, was that you're worried about the Vikings drafting a corner there. And I guess I can understand maybe with some of the recent history of the Vikings drafting corners that maybe that would be concerning to you. But look at what JC Horn just signed for. I mean, everything is a surplus value conversation. If you draft a guard, those guys are getting paid more all of a sudden. If you draft defensive tackle, but if you draft a corner, the top corners are getting paid 25 million, and usually corner is a young man's game. We're always talking about how like this guy plays man coverage and this guy has done this guy, but 18 mil for a Debo is what's being talked about. Wow. Okay. That would set a pretty high bar right there, especially since he was injured last year. That would set a high bar, but that's exactly the point, right? Is if you draft a cornerback, then you're getting a huge amount of surplus value if that player is good, and you've got young legs for them, and you could sign them into the future and everything else. Oh, Milton Williams with Carolina. Hey, Carolina's serious now. Carolina is serious now. They are a serious team now. After the way Bryce Young played in the second half of the season, they have now some talent on defense to go with Derek Brooks, who's a big guy. Derek Brown, Derek Brown, to go with him and Milton Williams. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for Carolina to get Milton Williams. Very interested to see that money right there. Now we're starting to get things rolling. Here we go. Milton Williams to the Carolina Panthers. How about that? The money there will be very, very interesting. I agree, Rach or Roch, that it's a really good pickup for the Carolina Panthers. They last year started to put together a pretty competent offense with Bryce Young. And they didn't even have great receivers at all. I mean, it was Adam Thielen and I don't know what else. So they've started to put together a pretty good offense. Chuba Hubbard was great for them. They were the first team, really, Carolina, that spent all that money on guards. And remember last year, everyone went, huh? What? Why are they spending $20 million on this guard? And now we're talking about a much worse guard potentially going for, $20 million on the market now. So they were ahead of the game there in spending on a guard last year. So they've built up a pretty good offense to work with, but their defense was historically bad. I think they allowed more yards than anybody else ever in history, and they played close games. Like, this is how fast it changes in the NFL, right? You go from what a laughing stock the Panthers are, their owner is throwing drinks at people or whatever, and then they hire a new GM who came from KC. They hire a new head coach who came from Tampa Bay and had helped Baker Mayfield turn it around. And they completely change what they're doing there with Bryce Young halfway through the season. He plays much better. They now look serious, and they get a player like Milton Williams, who is going to be an impact interior rusher for them. Now, Williams, I think if you're a team like Carolina, overpaying is a great idea for Milton Williams. Okay. Dan Moore, the left tackle, signed for 4 years, 82 million. Wow. Wow. Yeah, Cam Robinson's going to get some money. Cam Robinson is going to get some money. I saw a bunch of people from other teams, writers, saying, well, Cam Robinson should be a top target. Wow. After the way he played last year for the Vikings, I don't know about that, man. And now that I see Dan Moore, who's such an average left tackle, getting that seems like a lot. My thoughts on Josh Myers, not an upgrade. That's the problem with, I don't even disagree with the Garrett Bradbury takes that everyone has tossed out there, but you have to show me who's going to be a better idea. And I couldn't find that person. I couldn't find in free agency a better idea. And if the Packers are letting him go, you always have to consider the franchise that's letting someone go. And you have to give the Packers credit. Like, they're good at evaluating their own players. They usually don't let go a bunch of big stars. Miles wants to know if we should go after Grady Jarrett. Oh, how much did I circle back to Jonathan Allen? Visiting with the Vikings. I think that Grady Jarrett 3 years ago was one of the best players in the league. And I think Jonathan Allen is a better choice now based on how they've played recently for a pure pass rusher role. Grady Jarrett was a very average player. The thing about this, if you just looked at Grady Jarrett on paper, he had about as many pressures as Jihad Ward last year. It's just not the same guy as he was before. And that might be part of it. And this is why I would rather go Jonathan Allen than Grady Jarrett. Is Grady Jarrett is not the most physically imposing player. He's undersized. Quickness has always been the way he got in the backfield, as we saw against the Vikings numerous times. Jonathan Allen is a huge dude. Absolutely huge man. And I think, what is he listed at? No, he's only listed at 6'3", 300. Okay. He looks huge, but he's a first round draft pick, powerful, strong. I think maybe his strength stands out. I think strength will carry over better into his 30s on a short-term deal than quickness for Grady Jarrett. Both of them have dropped off, though. Both of them are not where they were. Just as I get a text from Jeremiah Searles that says the Vikings need to go sign Grady Jarrett. And just as I'm saying that I think that Jonathan Allen is a better choice than Grady Jarrett, let me look again at his numbers. I looked at his numbers earlier. Let me look again. Grady Jarrett last year, 744 snaps. That's good. But we're not talking about injured. 60.6 pass rush grade, 34 pressures. Let me give you some context to tell you where that ranks. Just for example. And I know, like, it was not a great defense, but in terms of pass rush grade for Grady Jarrett, he was 43rd last year in the league in pass rush grade. That's not what we expect from Grady Jarrett. But I mean, there's guys that are in that ballpark that are like Harrison Phillips was 42nd. So Harrison Phillips was 42nd last year in PFF pass rush grade, and Grady Jarrett was 43rd. That's how much he fell off, and that's football. That's just how it goes. Somebody gets to that age and they're not the same player. And that's why when it comes to free agency, we love names. And who's younger? How old is Grady Jarrett? Grady Jarrett is 32 and Jonathan Allen is 30. So I think that that's an easy choice, would be Allen. Uh, we have our first reference Skol guy of comp picks. Thank you. Yes, that is true. If they were to sign those players, that the comp pick would not be an issue. I just think that Allen profiles better. He was a top draft pick. He's a physical monster. He still was grading pretty well as far as his pass rush grade over the last 2 years. It was really his run defense that fell off, which is okay because that's not what the Vikings would be using him for. We have gotten to now. I see a Malik Collins. I did see Malik Collins was let go. Was that a cap casualty? Because I thought Malik Collins was pretty good. Is that what happened there? Let me see. Let me see what he did last year. This is why it's so good to have the numbers, so I don't have to guess at what somebody did last year. Because my perception was that Malik Collins was pretty good. Was he good last year? Yeah. No, he was good last year. 45 pressures, 70 pass rush grade. Huh. It must have been a cap casualty, I guess. But we have reached a little bit of the boredom here if we're talking about making, trades for Jonathan Grenard. Yeah, I would move on from Jonathan Grenard for just about anything right now. Carlton Davis to the Patriots. All right, we're rolling. We're rolling. Oh, we do have a relevant number, by the way. Carlton Davis, $20 million per year over 3 years. Really tells you what Byron Murphy's going to get. Byron Murphy is going to be around $20 million a year. And are the Vikings willing to pay that? So Carlton Davis is off the list and Paulson Adebo is off the list. So now the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking with Adebo off and Carlton Davis off. I'm trying to get Dane Mizutani to jump in here, talk about what's going on. We're getting the prices. We're just not getting the Vikings involved yet. We're getting all the numbers. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo is the one I wanted to talk about. So the numbers came out for Jimmy Garoppolo, and he is now going to get $11 million. Is that what I saw? $11 million over 10. And that tells us what the price for a backup is going to be. If the Vikings want to bring back Daniel Jones, they are likely to have to pay at least $10 million for him. If Jimmy Garoppolo is getting that. Now, that's not a terrible price for a backup quarterback, and that's what you paid for Sam Darnold last year. But do you want to spend that much on a backup? Do you want to wait? I think it would be worth it to spend that much on a backup for this year. Carl says, very early, not a great start. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Some of these players, Adebo, Carlton Davis, they were my targets. I don't know if they were the Vikings targets. They were my targets. They were players that I was interested in based on statistical profiles and histories and what I've seen of them playing against the Vikings. But Brian Flores would know a little bit better, I think, probably what works for him. And some of these prices might be just very high. Andrew Kramer just blue skied on, because that's what we're using today with Twitter dying, that he thinks Byron Murphy's going to get more than Carlton Davis. $20 million a year for him, 18 for Paulson Adebo. Big money is going to cornerbacks. And that's why I'm sorry who threw it out there earlier. The idea of drafting a corner is very attractive to me. Trey Amos of Ole Miss or Darian Porter from Iowa State. Like these guys, if they work out, I mean, Carlton Davis is a good corner, but he's not like Patrick Surtain. He's not Jalen Ramsey. And that money is starting to get close to that. He's good. But $20 million for Carlton Davis is a lot. Oh, Twitter is back up, you say? Let me see. Let me see if mine's working. Mine's still spinning. I'm still getting spinny guy. We're doing okay here, though. Charvarius Ward, that's another option. I think we're doing okay. I'm still getting, my phone is getting the updates from Schefter, and people are blue skying everything. So we're good. We're good. And I've got it over here too on NFL Network. So we're good. We're rolling along. $20 million for Murphy pass and go Asante Samuel Jr. I don't know how much Asante Samuel Jr. is going to get now. Everybody gets this much money. So where do you want to spend it? Murphy, the argument for Murphy was always for on my side was that Byron Murphy Jr. has been a great fit. He is not a super shutdown freak. Oh my gosh, he's just going to line up against the best receiver and you're never going to hear that guy today. I think that's also kind of disappeared in the NFL, which is sad. How many of those guys are there? Most of the best corners now, you can lock them down at a certain time if you need a third down man-to-man coverage. But, most of them are playing zone coverage. When you look at the numbers, I could pull this up. Carlton Davis was one of those rare guys. I'll get the numbers for you on this. I've been fascinated by this. I looked this up that even going back like 5, 6, 7 years, the number of players who were playing man coverage, even when Xavier Rhodes was at his best. I'll get you the numbers on this. This is why the PFF thing can be so demonstrative, if that's a word, to kind of tell us where the league is going. Because somebody like Carlton Davis played a ton of man coverage, but there's just not many guys who are that shutdown guy because everyone in the league is using all this, motion and stuff. So it's hard to have one guy just track another guy all day long, which is taking away a classic NFL thing of like, here's Deion Sanders versus Jerry Rice, or the night that, Odell Beckham was at his peak and Xavier Rhodes shut him down 2016, got a pick. That was a great moment. Like, oh, look at it's heavyweight battle. We just don't see that. And this is a Byron Murphy argument, is that Byron Murphy is a zone corner who isn't shutting people down, but is in the right place at the right time and demonstrative. Is that what I said? What did I say? Did I say that? But Byron Murphy is a guy who's in the right place, right time a lot. And one of the reasons he gets a lot of target numbers, I think, is because he's so often playing zone coverage. And if the throw goes into his area, then PFF is going to track it as him being targeted. That might go a little bit less with someone who's playing man coverage, where if it's thrown right, it has to be thrown right into your coverage. That doesn't mean I think Byron Murphy is worth 20 million, but I also don't think Carlton Davis is worth 20 million. So just to demonstrate this, last year, in terms of coverage percentage, there were only 6 corners in the league who played man-to-man coverage more than 40% of the time. That tells you right there, most of the league is playing zone coverage, and Carlton Davis was one of them. That's what made me interested in Carlton Davis, because the other guy for the Patriots, Christian Gonzalez, was another one of those guys. They're going to play man on the outside. The Vikings guys didn't. I think they want to a little bit more than that. So let me circle back to, I think I started to make a Jimmy Garoppolo point, but the thing, if you're just joining, it's our Vikings free agency special. We're having a good time here. I'm told Dane Mizutani, the Pioneer Press, is going to drop in. He's grown impatient. At the beginning of the show, I said, hey, come on, join. He's like, well, things might happen, and things are starting to happen elsewhere, but since nothing has happened yet for the Vikings. But here's what we do know. There is progress. So just to recap, there is progress. The progress is in the prices, to sound like some sort of Kevin O'Connell saying. Like, the progress is in the prices. We now know after the first hour what the top guys are going to get paid for the Vikings, what they need to spend. So they've allowed, or I don't know if they were in on some of these guys, but what's happened is these other players have signed in other places, which allows us to be able to take a good guess. So if you want Byron Murphy back, it's going to cost $20 million a year. Do you want to do it? I don't think it's insane, but I think it's a lot. Now, if you structure it a certain way, if you structure it to be a little bit cheaper on the early side, it's not a huge problem. But if you got 20 million, do you spend it on Murphy or DJ Reed? DJ Reed is probably the answer to that question. And we also know that if they are getting a defensive tackle, that Javon Kinlaw has set that pretty high. Have not seen the Milton Williams numbers. If you guys see the Milton Williams numbers, I am very curious about that. but I don't think anyone else is going to approach Milton Williams. The remaining defensive tackles, though, if you're having to give up for a pass rushing defensive tackle like Javon Kinlaw, who's very limited, $15 million, that's where I'm thinking more about the draft. The offensive line tackle price was insane. I don't know what it's going to be for guards. We did see a center get signed for 3 years, $42 million, and Drew Dahlman. It's not exactly the same as a guard. And the Chicago Bears are another one of the early kind of winners of this free agency offseason period because they have signed or traded for 3 offensive linemen, which is exactly what you figured that Ben Johnson was going to do. He's going to come in and he was going to build up that offensive line because that's how he succeeded with the Detroit Lions. So they are kind of in the early lead for a team that has made the most progress around Caleb Williams. But is that going to actually help Caleb Williams? I don't know. It's going to help their run game for sure. They're going to be a lot better run game. Okay, I'm checking with Dane, seeing if he's going to pop in here. Who do you want to overspend on now? Now that you guys know the prices, and that's what we were talking about earlier in the comment section. We were talking about earlier, what position would you overspend on? Well, now we know some of the names that are off the board. So who would you overspend on? This whole day is being dominated by people talking about how Twitter is broken or whether Twitter is back. It seems to be twitching. Like it's dead and it's sort of like, no, I'm not, because I can't get Twitter to come up on my actual computer here, but I have been able to get the updates from Adam Schefter. Now you guys are saying it's back. Let's see. Okay, now it looks like it actually is back. What a time for blue sky. All right, let's I'm trying to bring in Dane here. Dane, I hear you, but for some reason I don't see you. Why would that be? Oh, here you go. Okay, I don't see your camera, but I know you're there. Hi, Dane.
Hey, Coller, let me X out and try again.
Okay. I don't know why that would be, but at least we can hear him. Oh, okay. Reed and Patrick McCarthy. Yeah, Patrick McCarthy is an interesting one. Does McCarthy, because he has not been like this locked in big time player, is McCarthy somebody who's going to slip through the cracks a little bit, or is it impossible at this point for anybody to slip through the cracks who is an offensive lineman? If you're not familiar with Patrick McCarthy, how dare you, but I'll help. Because he hasn't been a big name that's really been talked about a lot. So Patrick McCarthy is 6'4", 305. He's been with Baltimore since 2019, and he's played every position for them, literally. He started out as a center, and he was a part-time center. And then he went to right tackle in 2021. And this is 400, 500, 700 snaps. Then he went to left tackle in 2022 and 2023. And this last year, he played left guard. So he has played at least 200 and something snaps at every single position. And he's always been pretty good. But the one area that he does not have huge grades, he's got good grades in pass blocking, but is not a run blocker so much. And they kind of had that with Dalton Risner. I think that McCarthy's better, but they kind of had that with Dalton Risner. Okay, now we've got Dane. Dane, where are you?
I was looking for a place in my apartment to do this wonderful free agency special.
Okay.
Work from home with the girlfriend and me. It's just, I wasn't going to live pod in the apartment. So we're in a community room in the apartment.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Well, yeah. All right. So let's start off here, Dane. Dane Mizutani, Pioneer Press, everyone. Well-known, very famous for, I should say, post-game podcasts with me all year long. I think since right now, all we have is other people signing players, we have gained knowledge about what these things cost. So what is your assessment of what things cost in free agency?
I thought we would have like one player that gave you the sticker shock that was like, okay, that team might just be willing to overpay for this guy. Let's not read too much into that. I think we see that sometimes. I saw Mina Kimes today was referencing the Christian Kirk deal. It seems like every year there's a deal that makes you go, what? And then the market kind of levels off. It hasn't leveled off this year. Anything from Javon Kinlaw getting 3 years, $45 million for, was it 4.5 sacks with the Jets last year after looking like a bust with the Niners, to Jordan Lewis, 3 years, $30 million. I mean, even Drew Dahlman, I think that's a pretty good signing. That's $14 million per year for a guy like that who doesn't excel at pass blocking. Like, all these numbers are indicative of it's expensive right now. The market is high. I don't know if it's fair to say it reminds me of that year in the NBA where the, Shabazz Muhammads of the world. Actually, I think Shabazz Muhammad was the guy who missed out, but Alan Crabb signed for like $22 million, and he's not in the NBA anymore. I say that to say, like, are we trending towards that where a lot of the contracts signed this year are going to be viewed in 2 or 3 years as like wholly overpay? Or is this just a case of the cap's going to continue to go up? So these numbers that might surprise us now might not look so bad later. But I think what it shows right now, at least an hour and a half into free agency, is that whatever number the Vikings sign whatever player at, it's probably going to make a lot of people upset. But that's just the going rate at this point.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is that the prices being crazy high was kind of what was reported going into this, and that has come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you have the cap going up as much as it has and will continue to go up. This is something that we talked with people at the combine about, where there is two ways to look at it. It's, man, if you play in free agency, you are overpaying like crazy for these players. But then if you go sign last year a Jonathan Grenard for $22 million a year, there might have been some people who said, he's only got one good year of pass rushing, but you end up, Evan Turner is a great reference there. Well done, Hero Killer. That's exactly Evan Turner.
Yes.
But
yes.
But then Jonathan Grenard, 1 year later, it's like, oh, well, that contract looks brilliant now at this point. And so which side are you going to be on with some of these signings? And I think there's ways to kind of risk assess there. With the corners, that's where I've really noticed it, because there was so much discussion about Byron Murphy Jr. Were they going to be able to bring him back? They moved back his void date. And then we start this, and all of a sudden, Paulson Adebo gets 18 million, which I think I would have done for him because I think he's young and he's really good. Carlton Davis at 20, I would not have done. Carlton Davis at 20 is too much for me, but it also says that Byron Murphy is going to sign somewhere for that type of money if the league actually values him as much as some of these other corners. And that's what I'm interested in too, because some of these other corners either have, now Murphy had interceptions last year, but they have like a longer reputation for playmakers, or Carlton Davis is known as a lockdown type of guy, whereas Byron Murphy has not really got that reputation as more of a zone corner who got 6 picks. So this one could go the other way. It could go like, oh, actually his market wasn't what he thought it was.
Yeah, that's fair too. But I did look at that Carlton Davis number as probably something that would be indicative of what Byron Murphy Jr. was going to get. Maybe you're right. Maybe his market isn't what he thought it was. But if he ends up signing below $20 million annually, would be kind of the first domino of, okay, the market is kind of leveled out. So I'm anticipating whenever the Byron Murphy news comes out, I expect him to clear Carlton Davis, just because it just seems like every deal that comes in at this point, it's not necessarily you're going to be the next highest paid player, but I think there is a world where people viewed Byron Murphy Jr. as the number one corner ahead of Carlton Davis, ahead of DJ Reed even. So if Byron Murphy Jr. comes in below 20, I would be surprised, just because it seems like the market is trending towards him being one of the highest paid cornerbacks in the league. And I thought it was going to be right around 20. And if Carlton Davis is making that, then I can only assume Byron Murphy Jr. is gonna go higher than that. I wrote an article yesterday in the Pioneer Press, though, which now looks a little silly, but I pitched 5 free agents they should sign. I had Paulson Debo on there too, because I thought there was a world where, okay, Byron Murphy Jr. might cost you $21 million a year. Maybe you can take that money and turn it into DJ Reed and Paulson Adebo. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. It's not how it's going to work this year. And that's pretty clear right now. I haven't seen numbers on Paulson Adebo yet.
18.
So I'm curious. It's 18? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it's just the market is what it is now. I think when you're trying to guess heading into this point, you often undervalue what these guys are going to make when the bidding war begins. I think in a way it's smart of the Vikings to kind of let this thing figure itself out rather than, there is an argument, should you be the first person to strike and then people are working off of the number you paid rather than you working off the number other teams paid. But I think when you kind of just take a step back and realize what's going on here, it'll give you just more knowledge on what to do. I know Vikings fans don't want to hear that. I think people think the offseason is ruined 90 minutes into free agency because the Bears signed Drew Dahlman and the Vikings haven't made an offer on anybody yet. But I caution you, it's not. But yeah, I understand wanting a splash and not getting one yet.
I think that the chat has been very patient. And I've been impressed. The chat's been we did get one attempt to trade Jonathan Grenard, but other than that, we're doing fine. And I'm just making fun of whoever that was. I'm just picking on you, but we have not lost our minds yet. An hour and a half in, but I need to run down some things. And William mentions Malik Collins. I like that idea for Malik Collins, by the way.
I like it too. Yeah.
But Jonathan Allen visiting the Vikings so far, aside from the punter re-signing, is the biggest news of the day. And we also have, a few players that I thought might be interesting for the Vikings come off the board at defensive tackle. Kinlaw. I was sitting here thinking, hey, maybe they could get Kinlaw for like $5 million or something. And nope, that was way wrong. And then BJ Hill, like, is he?
I know you liked him.
What's the Skyline chili that, like, does he like the Skyline? Because he got underpaid, I think, for BJ Hill. But okay, now this is interesting. Diana Rossini says the Milton Williams deal is not done with Carolina. Okay. Did something come out with him signing from Carolina and then other teams went, wait, we've got one more offer for you? That's interesting. That's like an Anthony Barr signing with the Jets and then not signing with the Jets. This is why we live stream, folks, because the drama just never ends. But how do you feel about Jonathan Allen visiting the Vikings?
I like it if it's not the only thing they do at defensive tackle. Like if you sign Jonathan Allen, he's visiting today. If you sign him tomorrow or if you sign him tonight even, and you just say, we're good, we don't need to address that problem anymore, then I don't like it. I do like it if you, depending on the number, I will say too, I'm not paying Jonathan Allen. I mean, you might have to pay him $15 million if Javon Kinlaw's getting that, but I don't know if I want to go that high on him. So the number matters, but what matters more to me is like, if you sign Jonathan Allen, I mean, it kind of seems like it might be trending in that direction. He visits here. Oftentimes when guys visit, they don't get to leave because the team just makes sure everything's in order and then they sign them. If he signs here and they decide that's a reason not to target defensive tackle in the first round of the draft or with your first pick, if you trade back, then I do not like the signing because I think at 30, there is data to support that's about the decline. I think it happens more with edge rushers, but I think when you look at a guy who has generated interior pressure throughout his career based on all of his skill sets, once you hit 30, oftentimes that declines. So I think if you sign Jonathan Allen as a part of a greater solution, then I like it. I think if you sign him as a cure-all to fix all of the issues that you have had with interior defensive line, then I don't. So it's an intriguing thing to me. I like him probably more than Grady Jarrett just because, I mean, maybe I'm just paying for past performance, but like first round pick, Grady Jarrett's kind of undersized. I know Jonathan Allen's not huge, but it did seem like Grady Jarrett won with speed. They just need like a mauler, and Jonathan Allen kind of fits that mold, in my opinion, more. Coming off a torn pec, so maybe you get him at a slight discount, but I like that thought process of kicking the tires with him. I like that you didn't trade for him. You let his market kind of play itself out, and now maybe you strike there. But I would still very much so target interior defensive line with my first pick in the draft, whenever that is.
So now Aaron is saying in the comments that there's conflicting reports on Paulson Adebo, that I had initially seen 18 million per year, but now he says that it's 30 million over 3, which would be a great number for Paulson Adebo. And I was curious about that because he was injured last year and he kind of has one of those one good year type of guys. Now he's younger, and that's why I like it. Just to respond to your Jonathan Allen point, though, totally agree that it should be a like addition to go along with other stuff at that position. I still have Derek Harmon from Oregon as my top target on the draft. If we were making like, who's your favorite 10 players who were mocked from 20 to 40, I think he's probably my favorite because he is an all around 3 down, 750 snap a year type of pass rusher, gets into the backfield, like all that sort of stuff. With someone like Jonathan Allen, you have to probably plan on 500 to 600 snaps from him. And you're looking for 40 to 45 pressures in a situational role. And it is interesting that you mentioned Allen's size, because I thought just from seeing Jonathan Allen play the Vikings, I don't know, 4 or 5 times over the years, I thought he was actually huge. I was like, yeah, he's a big, giant, huge dude. And I'm like, oh, he's only 6'3", 300 something, but he plays with such strength. I think that's a big thing. Technique. Like he's just a very, very good talent and has been elite over the years. I think Grady Jarrett fell off harder than he did. But I also would not be willing to just throw all the money at Jonathan Allen. I think it could actually work out for both sides, though. If Allen came to the Vikings and signed, like, let's just say a 1 year, $10 million deal. I like that. Something like that.
Yeah.
And then next year he gets 8 sacks, 47 pressures or something. For his perspective, he can then go out and get some huge deal, because even at 34 years old, we just saw Khalil Mack, who had dipped a little bit and then sort of come back. He got 18 million on a 1 year deal for Khalil Mack, who had a good year last year. But if you're one of those guys that has an injury, you're down kind of at the worst time, and then you sign and have one big year, that would benefit both sides, because the Vikings need that. And also probably don't want to sign him to a long-term deal. He gets a chance to play a lot in an interior that throws a lot at other teams too. And I think causes a lot of confusion. If you have this guy, he'd be a really good addition. So I like that a lot. Although now, like, who even knows what's happening with Milton Williams? Because it seems like that's being pulled back off the table. Let's talk about other. Here's a good question from Infamous. What does a successful free agency look like for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah? That's a great question, Infamous. What do you think, Dane?
I think it starts and stops, frankly, with the interior, the trenches on both sides of the ball. I know people want corner, and I think whatever happens with Byron Murphy Jr., you do need to address that, because you can't go into next year with Mekhi Blackmon and parts as what you're going to do, or Mekhi Blackmon and whoever you take in the first round. So I think you need to address cornerback, but I think they will. So I think for me, like, a successful free agency looks like one, for sure, maybe even 2 guards. I want 2 new guards, whether it's Will Fries and Patrick McCarry, Will Fries and Tevin Jenkins and Kevin Zeitler. I don't really care, frankly, who they are, as long as they address it, because the Band-Aids that they've been putting on this thing in the interior of the offensive line for a decade, it just hasn't worked. And if you really want to be serious about contending next year and giving JJ McCarthy or Aaron Rodgers, whoever the quarterback is, time to throw, and Kevin O'Connell time to operate the offense he wants to operate. You need interior protection. So I think it starts there for me. But I think a guy like Jonathan Allen would help make this a successful free agency. I want them to address something. Oh,
We've got some news here. DJ Reed to the Lions.
wow.
25 million? $25 million per year for DJ Reed to the Detroit Lions. Now, I don't think that that's much different than Carlton Davis for them as far as the style of the player and the talent of the player. But when they had him last year, now this is coming from the chat. I haven't seen this pop up yet. Are you seeing it?
I'm seeing Jordan Schultz.
Yep. Okay, Jordan Schultz got it. Okay, all right.
DJ Reed, 3 years, 48.
I do trust you guys. Actually, the chat has been incredibly good at like not playing games with the reports. So thank you for doing that. So what is does Schultz have? Does he have the numbers on it?
3 years, 48 includes 32 million guaranteed. So that would average.
Okay. So the initial, okay. So the chat did miss on this one for the number. So, okay. So that's much more reasonable then.
Yeah.
3 years, $48 million. Now it's not to have the Bears and the Lions winning free agency early on is not great for the Vikings, but okay. Let me correct that number. 3 years, 48 million, 32 guaranteed. That's what you said. I got that right here now. He replaces Carlton Davis. That's not bad all of a sudden, Dane. That's not bad. If Byron Murphy Jr. wants to come back to the Vikings for $16 million a year, I mean, that is completely fine with me. Let's see. We got Isaiah Rodgers. Oh, look at this. We got a signing. We got a signing, Dane. Yay, the first signing of the day. All right. We have Isaiah Rodgers, cornerback formerly of the Philadelphia Eagles, a 2-year, $15 million contract with the Vikings. Now, let me tell you, Dane, I don't know if your Isaiah Rodgers take was updated, but mine was. This was a guy that was on the list for me as an under-the-radar signing, which his number is certainly proving that. Rodgers is a 27-year-old corner who is undersized. He's only 170 pounds, but he has been a part-time corner for the Colts and the Eagles. And every time he plays well. So he's only had one real year as a 500-plus snap guy and was kind of a rotational player for the Eagles. But 2 years, $15 million to bring him in. He is always graded extremely well. Just to real quick read his grades. When he's played over 300 snaps, 70.7, 82.1, 76, and career 86.6 quarterback rating when thrown into his coverage. Looks to me like a nickel guy. No, he's actually played outside. Just from his size, that usually looks like a nickel guy. If you're telling me that they can get someone this is more of the Jonathan Grenard type of, and I know it's not the type of money, but it's 27 years old, Dane. I think this is important. Somebody who in their sample size of playing has done well, but is not on the older side. And if Byron Murphy were to come back with Isaiah Rodgers, Mekhi Blackmon, Dwight McGlothern, all of a sudden that might look pretty good.
Yeah, I don't hate that. It would be one thing if they signed Isaiah Rodgers, who I will admit I'm not super familiar with. I didn't deep dive like you did. To a sticker shock number that was like, what? Are you kidding me? But I mean, with the money we've seen being thrown around in free agency, getting a guy like that with some experience, 2 years, $15 million, like I could get behind that. It falls in line to me, like a little bit with the thought process of Jonathan Allen rhetoric we were just talking about. Like if this is their only move, then I don't love it. But if they're doing Isaiah Rodgers at 2 for 15, which equates out to 7.5 a year, math, and they're able to bring back Byron Murphy Jr. or go out and sign a Travarius Ward, or I don't know, like then I like it. I don't like it if he's the only one. But this is like when you talk about winning on the margins in free agency. This is a guy who we could look back on as, wow, that was a really good signing. that maybe we didn't love at first because it wasn't the sexy name, but a guy who has proven himself, throughout his career, and probably is just looking for that next jump, in his career as far as playing time, opportunity, things of that nature. So he has a Super Bowl. He comes from Philly, and the pedigree there, the experience, learning in that room. 27 years old, probably projecting to be like entering, if not in his prime, probably in his prime. Uh, I like the move. It really doesn't bother me at all. I think there's really little to low risk here.
He played in the middle of the season a lot of significant snaps for the Philadelphia Eagles, and including in the divisional round, 57 snaps. Only played 8 in the Super Bowl, but 57 snaps in the divisional round for the Philadelphia Eagles. But a guy who does not have a crazy amount of playing time in his career. He is at the highest in terms of snap count, 525 snaps a couple years ago with the Indianapolis Colts. But this to me was when I looked over all of the potential corners for them. Of course, the top names stood out to me. But Rodgers was somebody that I'll have to look at my top 60 list. I think I listed like just outside of the top players for free agency because I thought this is somebody that they might actually be able to get a pretty good deal on. Let me see. Where did I have Isaiah Rodgers? So I had kind of a top 10, and then I had him somewhere around here. Yeah, just outside of that, I think. Anyway, so he was somebody that I had identified as a potential good deal. And in a universe where we're talking about everybody getting overpaid, huge dollar figures being thrown out there, to get somebody for 7.5 that can play and that can potentially be a starter who is maybe even just average, above average. Oh, yeah, he was the guy who was suspended for gambling. Great call, Nano Joe. I wondered what happened there. I assumed just on his numbers it was an injury. I forgot that he was suspended for gambling. But, okay, I can't help myself. It's a good bet for the Vikings to make, though. Am I right, everybody? Come on. We got to do that. No, I think that this is what you want to do in free agency rather than spend on the highest guy, Carlton Davis, $20 million a year. Now, where the difference in the middle is DJ Reed. At $16 million a year for DJ Reed, that would have been something I would have liked the Vikings to do. Oh, people are pointing out how funny it is that also his name is Rodgers and it's Rodgers to the Vikings. Ale, I don't think this is Shannon Sullivan. I think that this is a guy who's better than Shannon Sullivan, but he's not someone who's going to be, wow, they got DJ Reed. He's going to play every single snap. He's going to shut people down. I think it's more of a quality value signing in a day where everybody is going crazy and overspending. But I also think, Dane, that if the plan is to get one more corner, and I'm going to have to go look now and see what we got for corners with DJ Reed and with Carlton Davis off the list. But if you're talking about adding one more corner to go along with Mekhi Blackmon and now Isaiah Rodgers, I think that that's pretty good. And yeah, Matthew points out that he's played so much more on the outside. He's not a slot corner. I expected based on his size, he was going to be a slot corner, but it's very clear that, so now there's some reporting. I don't know who Caden Steele is, that the Vikings could be interested. Is that a real person or is that some like rando that, there could be some Milton Williams? I don't know. We'll see on that, guys. But because the Williams thing is weird. He goes to Carolina, then he doesn't go to Carolina. But just sticking with the actual signing that just happened, if that's their plan to develop Dwight McGlothern, have Mekhi Blackmon come back, bring in Isaiah Rodgers, and then one other player, and then maybe draft one in the middle or late round, that to me is a good overall plan for free agency rather than asking one guy to do it all and sort of save the defensive backfield, because I don't think the defensive backfield works that way. I think it works on its weakest links. And we've seen this. Patrick Peterson played great in 2022 and they attacked Shannon Sullivan all day long and it didn't matter at all. And I think it's better to spread out. Oh, he's a beat reporter in Philly. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't. Caden Steele sounds fake. I'm sorry to him. But if the Vikings all of a sudden are interested in Milton Williams, we could have some. Now some of the posts are being deleted. Earlier reports of him going to Carolina. This is what we came for, Mr. Mizutani.
Caden Steele, he covers the Philadelphia Eagles for NJ.com.
Okay, it's a real person.
He's a real person. And I'm not going to discredit him on this podcast. So we will see. Certainly, if the Vikings are in on Milton Williams, I don't know. I don't know what the number is going to look like. But he was a freaking superstar in the playoffs for Philadelphia. So that would probably change my thought on Jonathan Allen. We'll see. I don't want to dive too deep down this rabbit hole right now. But certainly something to keep an eye on with Milton Williams. Going back to your point about Rodgers, though, I think the one you made about, you attack the weakest link, and oftentimes that can make or break a secondary is a good one. Because if they've now gone into this free agency, probably still talking to Byron Murphy, but at least finding someone with value that has the ability to play and has shown in his albeit limited snaps that he can, like, that is something I think probably helps you more than just throwing the bag at Carlton Davis and saying, you're our guy. I think if you can walk away with two guys rather than one big guy. Now, if there was like a legitimate shutdown number one corner, I know Carlton Davis has proved himself last year with Aaron Glenn, but he doesn't, to me, strike as a guy like a J.C. Horn who just got paid. Patrick Surtain. Like, if there was a guy like that, sure, throw the bag at them. I don't care. But I think there is some value in finding someone like Isaiah Rodgers and pairing him with someone else, or bringing back Byron Murphy. And I think if you're able to do both things, your collective secondary looks better because of it. So I can't stress, I don't want to treat this move like it's going to win the Vikings a Super Bowl, but if it's the first move of the day, in a day where a lot of people are getting overpaid, I'm good with it.
Yeah, and for me, I'm always going to try to do the best with the numbers on something like this. And if you can find a player who is consistently over his career, let me get his snap count, how many snaps he's had. He's had 1,300 snaps over his career and is 27 years old, in his prime, and has always performed at a pretty high level playing outside corner. The reason I'm guessing that the guy doesn't get a ton of love is because of his size. But we even saw this from Brian Flores last year with, or was it, 2023 with drafting Mekhi Blackman, where there were a lot of people who were asking like, hey, why are they drafting this guy? He's undersized and he doesn't weigh that much, but he was kind of a monster for somebody at his size, where he was a good tackler, and tackling doesn't always have to do, as everyone knows from Antoine Winfield, doesn't always have to do with your exact height and weight. And so Rodgers has been an above average tackler, an above average coverage player, over 1,300 snaps, which is a good sample size. The upside is probably a little limited for him being some sort of shutdown freak. Our friend Alec Lewis is saying Jeff Okudah is somebody to watch for the Vikings, maybe a reclamation project type of player there. But I think we do have to go, just to put a bow on the Isaiah Rodgers. I like it a lot. I mean, this is one of those where it's not quite, I don't want to quite compare it to somebody like Blake Cashman last year, but when they signed Cashman, I think we all went, okay, that's a Minnesota guy. Like that's a linebacker. And then he ended up playing really, really well on a very reasonable deal. And Sean asks, are you getting a discount because he got caught gambling? Probably are. Yeah. And I'm going to have to look more into that exact thing, but he played last year for Philly and played a good number of snaps, played in the Super Bowl. So I don't know what exactly the details were on the gambling issue with Isaiah Rodgers. It is 100% concerning if somebody was suspended for an entire year for gambling, for sure. At the same time, if you did get a deal for that, then, well, you can't apologize for it. So I think this is versus spending 20 million on Carlton Davis, a better value type of decision, but it cannot be the only decision they make. We have to talk about Milton Williams, though, because all the reports came out, which would insinuate, Dane, that Milton Williams' agent told someone that he was going to sign with the Carolina Panthers. And then all of a sudden, now we're getting, what is his name? Clayton Steele. When I write a novel, lead guy is going to be named Clayton Steele, 100%. We're getting, was it Clayton, Caden
Caden
Steele?
Steele. Caden
Doesn't
Steele.
matter. Caden Steele. I love that. Anyway, so when Caden Steele isn't fighting crime or whatever, he's reporting that the Vikings are interested in Milton Williams here. And all of a sudden, we have kind of chaos a little bit, because if Milton Williams comes here, we are very likely talking over $20 million per year. And with him last year, he was excellent, but he also played next to Jalen Carter. He also only played 500 snaps, Dane. And that's what would be worrisome to me about spending 20 plus $1 million. At the same time, this is the thing that I have demanded for so long that the Vikings do. Please just go out and spend all the money on a defensive tackle, get after the passer. Can you imagine this defense with a guy who could create 40 pressures last year on 300 pass rush snaps? Like, that is an incredible rate. So I think that going after Milton Williams is something I was concerned a little bit about price tag, but if it happens, I'm going to say, okay, like, this defense is now looking completely stacked on the front seven.
Yeah, for sure. And just a quick note, Twitter's back down. So, oh, well.
That's all right. We're blue skying it up here.
Yeah,
I made an account months ago and haven't done a thing with it. And today that is paying off.
Yeah, back on blue sky. Who knew?
Okay.
Big day.
According to Daniel, the Cardinals, Panthers, and Vikings are all working toward trying to get Milton Williams in the running. So now it seems like there's kind of a battle there. And they were in on Christian Wilkins last year. Mm-hmm. They were in that discussion, but then the Raiders went nuts. Maybe it is Milton Williams' agent trying to pump it up. Like, we'll sign, we'll do it. But I don't know. Usually you don't see this. You don't see it announced. Okay, he's going to do it. My only thought was that it came out so quick and early that maybe some teams hadn't been told by the agent yet. And we're like, wait. Or he got, I don't know, did he get cold feet that fast? I'm not sure. But I've always been of the mind, talking about Milton Williams, like, look, there's some concern there with the lack of snaps. Mm-hmm. And there's some concern with the production of only 1 year. Mm-hmm. But in this defense, with what they need, that would be a monster home run for them on the first day of free agency.
It would. I've been hesitant because I think he's going to cost a ton of money. I think if Carlton Davis is getting $20 million, I know it's a different position, but generally speaking, I think Milton Williams is probably going to clear that, because I think he's been widely regarded as, to some, the best player available right now. So I've been hesitant because I don't know if I want to spend that much money, commit that much money to a guy like him. But all I got to do to kind of quell those feelings of apprehension, I guess, is flip on the NFC Championship game, flip on the Super Bowl, and watch the best player on the field. I get it. He was playing alongside two monsters inside, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, and the whole Philadelphia, Josh Sweat, the entire front of the Philadelphia Eagles, no doubt contributed to his effectiveness. But you still got to make the plays, and there was one guy making more plays than everybody down the stretch this season, and his name was Milton Williams. So if he is a guy that they go out and swing big for, I could get behind that, because I think one thing this defense has lacked, and we've talked a lot about this, everyone's talked a lot about this, is the ability to generate with just the four-man rush or just the guys up front. The ability to generate pressure without Brian Flores having to send a bunch of exotics, a bunch of stunts. If you can just have a guy who can line up across from the other guy and just beat him, that unlocks so many things in your defense. Is he a guy that with a bigger role would flourish and turn into an even bigger star? Maybe. Is he a guy who, if he's given a bigger role, would be easier to take away from other teams? Maybe. I think it's worth the swing, though, when you're looking at what this defense needs, and what you maybe have missed out on so far, just across the board.
Do you need to check out to write about Isaiah Rodgers? Because if you do, just like I didn't want you to be Minnesota nice and like be sitting here like, oh, I've got to
No,
do okay. I'm just making
poking
sure.
around with it here and there. If they sign Milton Williams, I will need to check out. So yes,
that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I don't know how quickly this thing is going to come to fruition as far as whether Milton Williams is going to just suddenly sign or not. But where we are right now, jump in the chat. Let me know what you want for the Vikings in free agency, knowing what's off the board. Now that we have a good sense for what's off the board, what I've noticed, Dane, let me just take stock of kind of what we got here. And let me do like a bullet points. Here's what we got going on. The first thing is that none of the big offensive linemen have fallen outside of Drew Dalman. I think just rapid fire here. I think that they overpaid Drew Dalman, and he's not a major impact player, but he's kind of like a slightly better Garrett Bradbury. So I don't know if that changes what Chicago has done, but none of the other guards have fallen. Let's not lose the thread too much here, getting stuck on cornerback prices with the fact that we have no news on quarterbacks at all. The fact that we have no news on quarterbacks is probably the most shocking thing of the day, that I expected to wake up. And I thought that the first thing that I was going to find when I woke up, I set an alarm kind of early today because I just thought I was going to get this, like, the Seattle Seahawks are expected today to make the big play for Sam Darnold, and Rodgers is going to go here and Fields is going to go there and all this stuff. I've only seen whispers, and I have not seen big reports or definitive reports. And as close as it sounded the other night, I mean, Dane, I did a reaction podcast to Geno Smith getting traded, and my main takeaway was, Sam Darnold, you are a Seattle Seahawk. And the fact that we are this far in 2 hours with no update whatsoever, is that surprising to you? Because I think that it's pretty strange.
It's surprising to me because I think I even texted you this. Like, you don't make that deal if you're the Seahawks. You don't trade your franchise quarterback, Geno Smith. I know some people might not think he's a franchise quarterback, whatever. Like, he's the guy who's been your guy. You don't trade him without, at least in my estimation, a deal in place, like a Kirk Cousins Atlanta Falcons deal in place, where it's like, okay, 11:01 Central Time, the Seahawks have signed Sam Darnold. Like, I thought that's what it was going to be like. So yeah, it's a little surprising to me. It's surprising to me also that Sam Darnold is not viewed as the first domino. I mean, I've seen Adam Schefter on ESPN say Justin Fields is the first domino. It sounds like some people think Aaron Rodgers is the first domino. Like, I think if you're the Seahawks, like, wouldn't you just do everything in your power to make sure Sam Darnold doesn't go to the Steelers? Now, maybe Sam Darnold's representation is saying, we're going to wait to see what the Steelers do. And if the Steelers are out on Aaron Rodgers, then maybe we want to go to Pittsburgh instead. I'm like, this is totally conjecture here. But, like, there is one team that probably appeals to me more. I know there's probably a pull to the West Coast with Sam Darnold closer to home. Probably a level of comfort being that close to where you grew up and in your family. He's close with his family. All of those things, I get it. But one team, the Seattle Seahawks, just traded DK Metcalf, and one team just acquired DK Metcalf, and by the way, has George Pickens. And I think I might want to play for that team. I think if I was Sam Darnold and I could just pick at this point, maybe 96 hours ago before DK Metcalf was traded, I would say, like, yeah, I could sign me up for Seattle. Now you get rid of him, and I love Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's a good player. Um, but who else is there right now? Jake Bobo? Like, I think if I could go play with DK Metcalf and George Pickens with my cannon arm, like, I might do that. If I could play with Mike Tomlin, with TJ Watt, like with Minka Fitzpatrick, I would probably prefer that. So I would assume that's why this thing hasn't just taken off and gone running yet, is because I think everyone's kind of waiting for kind of the first person to flinch. I think once it does, I think all hell is going to break loose and we're going to see a lot of quarterbacks go. We'll see. Jimmy Garoppolo got $11 million today. So I think a quarterback's going to be expensive too.
Yeah, I know. I saw in the comment section saying, "Hey, what are you talking about? Jimmy Garoppolo re-signed as the Rams backup." Well, that's the first domino to fall. Okay. But I guess just the way that things had set up and had aligned, I was already of the mind that he was a Seattle Seahawk. In fact, the way that I wrote this morning was about JJ McCarthy and how he went about proving that he was the Vikings' future franchise quarterback. And then we saw the reports come immediately after Geno Smith was traded. It was instant that the reports came out. Oh, they're interested in Sam Darnold. It looks like it's going to happen. So my assumption was that when it came to Sam Darnold and the Seahawks, that in Indianapolis, the Seahawks probably had a conversation with Sam Darnold, a little whispering behind the scenes, and said, why don't you come sign with us? We're going to trade Geno Smith. And then they had already worked something out. And again, we're only 2 hours into this, but I just feel like that was something that looked inevitable. And I do wonder if, from Sam Darnold's perspective, if he would have said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to go out there and DK Metcalf and I'll throw it deep to him and Tyler Lockett. And you guys look pretty good. And then you move on from those players. And all of a sudden, maybe somebody else looks like they're going to be a more attractive option for Sam Darnold. And then there's still moving parts. So what could the moving parts be, which is Aaron Rodgers? Does Seattle get enthralled with Aaron Rodgers and that idea? I also think, Dane, that it feels like Aaron Rodgers is trying so hard behind the scenes to make Aaron Rodgers to somebody happen. Doesn't it feel that way? Doesn't it seem like Aaron Rodgers himself is the one starting all of these rumors?
Completely. It's the only thing I thought this weekend when all of a sudden the Vikings are in on Aaron Rodgers if they miss out on Daniel Jones. I even thought it this morning when all of a sudden the Steelers are in on Aaron Rodgers. Like, it feels like a guy who still wants to play and maybe doesn't have that much of a market and is just trying to drum up interest in himself. It sounds also like something Aaron Rodgers would very much do, which is float to insiders and say, like, I'm interested in this team. Are any of those teams interested in Aaron Rodgers? It sounds like the Steelers might be, but there's been no indication that the Vikings are. And like, unless Aaron Rodgers is signing for $2 million on a minimum contract, stay away from Minnesota. Like, if you're gonna have to pay a lot for that guy, even if you're having to pay anything for that guy, I can understand.
I'm a pass on that.
But it doesn't strike me as something Aaron Rodgers would do, which sign for the minimum. So he does appear to be a domino, though, and he's making sure he is one of the first ones. At least that's what I'm taking away.
Yeah, I would never do that you couldn't pay me. If Aaron Rodgers said, I will give you $1,000 out of my pocket for me to come play for the Vikings, be like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Last time I checked and I saw your coworker, Jace Frederick, tweeted this and said, didn't they draft JJ McCarthy with the 10th overall pick last year? I'm pretty sure they did. So I think that we have, of course, the situation that we always thought it was going to be, which is JJ McCarthy is going to be the starting quarterback for the Vikings. It's not going to be anybody else. It's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. But if somebody does decide that they're doing the Aaron Rodgers thing today, then that could send off all the dominoes falling to where everyone goes. I'm with you, though. I would have expected that Sam Darnold would have signed quickly and he would have sort of set the market or set the standard, and then everybody else would start to come into their spots. Now, Jeff saying that Trayvon Moehrig, one of my favorite guys, signing with the Carolina Panthers, 3 years, 51 million. So Moehrig is kind of in the same ballpark as a Cam Bynum. He's a little bit like different stylistically. He's more of a come up to the line of scrimmage. He blitzes a lot. I actually liked him for the Vikings potentially because he is more of that playmaking Harrison Smith type of box safety. 3 years, 51 million is a pretty high number, though, if that sets the mark for Cam Bynum. And that's another thing we haven't gotten, Dane, is we haven't gotten a Byron Murphy update, but we haven't mentioned as much Cam Bynum. And how are you feeling about where they stand at safety? Because now Maury comes off at 3 years, 51 million. I'm not good enough at math to figure that out, but it's got to be, what is that, like 16, $17 million, somewhere in that range. It's pretty expensive, but it's not insanely expensive. It's not 22 or $23 million a year. We also don't know Harrison Smith's status. I would assume that the Vikings know Harrison Smith's status, but in very Harrison Smith like fashion, he wasn't going to run to us and tell us, hey guys, like, here's what I'm doing. He wasn't going to Instagram post it or whatever else. But I do think that the safety position is very much in flux here. And if Moehrig didn't get a crazy contract, that maybe it becomes more realistic that Cam Bynum could return, even though they signed Theo Jackson to that deal.
Yeah, I think to me, it felt like the writing was on the wall for Cam Bynum when they signed Theo Jackson. So I think I still would be pretty surprised if Cam Bynum was back here. I guess some of that does hinge on, is Harrison Smith coming back to play? We don't know yet. If he is, then certainly I think Cam Bynum's gone. But if we go down the rabbit hole of in a few days when that number on Harrison Smith's contract is set to trigger, and you have to basically make a decision by then or pay him $25 million next year. If he retires and Cam Bynum is still sitting out there waiting for a contract, maybe there is a reunion to be had out there. I think we see this sometimes. Like, guys' representation sometimes miss the mark on their value. And if Trayvon Moehrig is signing for, what'd you say, 3 years for 51, that's $17 million a year. Like, if you're Cam Bynum's representation and you're trying to clear that, you might not. And if you don't in the early stages, you might miss out in the window completely. We've seen that happen before, where guys are waiting for their big contract, and then all the teams that need safeties sign their guys, and then all of a sudden you're a second tier guy or a second wave guy. If he becomes a second wave guy and Harrison Smith retires, I could see a situation where Cam Bynum's back here. If they're going to have to pay in the upwards of 17, 18, $19 million for Cam Bynum, I don't see a world. If Harrison Smith decides in the next few days that he would like to play next season at a fair cost to, he's not going to play for the minimum. I mean, even if you restructure him, you're going to have to give him a fair deal. If he decides that he is ready to go, then I think Cam Bynum's also out the door.
So now, according to Rhino Man on our comments, who is always reliable, appreciate you, Rhino Man.
Saying it. Yep.
Rappaport saying the Vikings in on Milton Williams.
Okay. No, the Rappaport saying they're here. It's a push notification. Twitter's still broken, but splash.
Now he's going to New England?
New England. Yep.
What the hell is going on here?
Yep.
What? That wasn't even a team that was mentioned for where he was going. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. Now, so Milton Williams goes from, we're talking ourselves into Milton Williams to now to New England for $26 million a year. Wow. I mean, that draft a freaking defensive tackle. I could understand why the Vikings would have checked in on Milton Williams after it fell apart with the Carolina Panthers. But we're talking about a guy who over the last 2 years has not even totaled 1,000 snaps, that he is a part-time type of player. And I was thinking around 20 around 20. And I know 6 million isn't that crazy much more, but it kind of is. 6 million is an entire player. They almost paid that much for Isaiah Rodgers just now. To go $26 million for the New England Patriots for Milton Williams. And I'll tell you, I have my Purple Insider top 60 free agents list in front of me. What I wrote about Milton Williams was I didn't put him in the top 10. Great player. Price tag will be nuts. Price tag officially nuts. $26 million for a guy who played 500 regular season snaps. And he did it next to the best player maybe in the league at that position at this point, which is Jalen Carter. I think that's a no-go for me. I don't think you spend all your money there, especially now that, they have offensive line needs. I think they need still another corner. There's other things that they're going to have to do here. You can't just go in and spend what would that be? Like a third of all of your free agent money on one guy. And I know the cap is going to be a little different than that, but $6 million is a couple of players and they need depth at positions too. We can't forget about this either. They need the Trent Sherfields back. They need the Jerry Tillerys and the other guys that are rotational players. I also think Anthony mentions Tershawn Wharton. I had heard that Tershawn Wharton was going to ask for a lot of money. And now if you're him, oh my gosh, you're like, pay up 15 to $20 million. To me, this is just too much. Milton Williams, a really great Super Bowl turned into something here. But usually, Dane, I always think stay away from guys that have helped Super Bowl teams because they get crazy overpaid because everybody watched them. This to me is too much, but it's not too much for New England. It's actually a great move for New England because New England has even like double the cap space of anybody else. And New England has no players. Their team is atrocious. They just got Vrabel. They've got a young quarterback. Like they should be doing something completely stupid, but I don't think the Vikings should have done something completely stupid. Do you agree?
Yeah, this was my whole worry all along with Milton Williams. Is I just said this. I thought he was going to cost you a lot of money. I didn't think he was going to cost you that much money, and even more so now that we know the price tag. Like you can't do it. Like one thing that's I think is hard in free agency is to determine like how much cap space your team has left because like there is a lot of salary cap gymnastics at play here, void years added, guaranteed money up front, like things that can bring down the initial cap hit. But still, like you eventually have to pay off that credit card. And if you're signing Milton Williams to that much money, even if you do some salary cap gymnastics and you get his cap hit down for this year so you can make some more moves, you're going to be paying for it long-term down the road. And at that point, like you're pot stuck. He better be one of the best defensive tackles in the league. He better turn into Jalen Carter. Like if you're paying him $26 million a year, like he has to sniff in like Chris Jones territory, Christian Wilkins territory, if you're paying him that much a year. So that was always my nervousness with him is in a vacuum. Yeah. If this was Madden, sure. Like I would jack up the bar of money until it said his interest level was all the way up. And then I would push sign and he would sign with me. But there are ramifications with giving a guy that much money when you, to your point, do not have as much cap space as the New England Patriots. For them, sure, why not? You have $127 million of cap space and you have Drake May and you need to prove that you can put talent around him. Like you're allowed to overpay in those situations. If you're New England, you're not in a position to overpay if you're the Vikings here. Like 60 million still goes away quickly if you start signing guys that are going to take up a large chunk of your cap percentage. So that was always my worry with Milton Williams. I liked him. I really did. But I thought you were going to have to overpay for him. And sure as shit you are.
Sue says, glad the Vikings aren't panicking and overpaying guys. I agree with that. Peter says, would love any guard news. I know we all promised guard news. Let me just run through real quick because I made this list and I'm going to go through kind of where we stand with the guys that I had on my list. And after I run through it, Will Fry's going to Seattle. Oh, they're trying to recruit Sam Darnold by getting Will Fries. Is that right? Do you have a a notification on that? That's Tyler dropping that in the comments. We'll see if that pops up in a second here. If you're seeing it, maybe your Twitter's working and
My
mine's
Twitter's
not.
still not working,
No,
but
mine's not. Oh no, you got no Tyler. Tyler got tricked. Okay, that's okay, Tyler. It happens. Tyler, a
Twitter's back.
consistent listener. Yeah, it happens. I told you to be careful. Be careful. Okay, that's fine. We'll see, but we'll see if we get that guard news at some point. So let me run through my 10 plus list, and then you can kind of compare to where you're at, Dane, and just what has happened so far. So Javon Holland was the number one guy on my list because Javon, I think, would be a complete game changer for the defense. That's only if they do not end up bringing back Cam Bynum or if Harrison Smith retires. Like there's some moving parts there with Javon Holland. Trayvon Moehrig is off the board. Will Fries and Will Hernandez are still there. BJ Hill is off the board. Now, here's a guy I really, really love for the Vikings. Don't worry about it, Tyler. Stuff happens. No big deal. That happens to all of us. Somebody thought earlier that it was 25 mil for DJ Reed. Like it happens. And it was only 16. That's how it goes. So, Levi Onwuzurike, Dane, from the Detroit Lions, he committed a homicide in the game against the Vikings. And I think he had 9 pressures, which pumped up his numbers, but still a rising player who's on the younger side that does not cost what Milton Williams cost because he didn't have huge sack numbers, but he did have big pressure numbers. He is the guy in my top 10. Now, DJ Reed is off the board. Paulson Adebo, Aaron Jones is all set. But Onwuzurike is one from the top 10 of my list that I'm still very interested in and is available.
Yeah, I like him. I think there's second wave guys now at this point. And maybe it's not even fair to consider them second wave guys because we're still only like 2 hours into free agency. But he makes sense as a guy like to kind of go out there and try and fill holes in the interior of the defensive line. Like I'd be curious who else you have. A name I put out there in my article from yesterday, older and coming off an injury, but was Javon Hargrave. I thought he makes sense. He's 32 years old. He's coming off a torn triceps, so he is not someone I think you're going to necessarily like build your defense around moving forward or the interior of your line moving forward. But he kind of falls into that same category with you of like production. Maybe you can have him at cost. Obviously, he's older, but I think a guy like him makes sense. All of this, your guy, my guy, with the backdrop of they're talking to Jonathan Allen as well. So there are guys still out there, and I think we should probably remind people that when like there are a lot of names now flying off the board, is that it's not over. Like there's still a lot of time, and it's still, when you look at the big picture here, probably better that they're not going out and spending all their money right away, even if that would be the fun thing to do right now.
Puna Ford signing with the Los Angeles Rams. He was on my list a little bit farther down, not in the top 10, but somebody who was interesting that revamped his career last year with the Los Angeles Chargers, and now he stays in LA except for with the other team. Same stadium packed with other teams' fans. So, but he was a guy that I was looking at. He's more of a run guy, more of like a get in the backfield quick and stop the run. He's not exactly someone that creates like a ton of pressure. So he wasn't so much on my radar. I do think that Rhino Man mentions Tershawn Wharton. The thing about him is he doesn't grade out very well, and he got 6 sacks, and sometimes that just pumps somebody up. He may have played well in the playoffs. You always worry about those guys who are on the Super Bowl teams from the Chiefs, stuff like that. Oh, is Nick Mullins? Do we have a Nick Mullins signing? Nick Mullins to the Jags? Wow, Nick Mullins, after all these years with the Minnesota Vikings, finds a new home with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, that would make sense because the Vikings are going to get someone different as a backup quarterback. And Mullins probably wants to be a QB2 somewhere and has been for the Vikings the last couple of years, but is definitely not that going forward if they're going to bring in someone who could start if they need them to. So, just real quick, congratulations to Nick Mullins. I think we all respect the hell out of Nick Mullins because and I don't, we don't have to spend a ton of time on it, but like this guy outworks everybody. He is not big. When you see him in the locker room, you're like, that guy's playing in the NFL. And when he got in, this dude, he just went for it. And he almost won them games. He came this close to getting them to the playoffs. It would have been epic in 23 if he had done that. So I appreciate his effort and how much it takes to get to the NFL for him. Oh, that's right. Grant Udinski is the offensive coordinator there. Just how much it takes, how much he brings to a room, the effort on a daily basis. He told me a story one time that when he was with San Francisco, they had a bunch of injuries at safety and he had to practice at safety. And he was the only guy that knew the defense well enough to practice at safety. Like that's what he brings. But it does bring about a question though, Dane, is who is the Vikings backup quarterback going to be?
Well, it's not Nick Mullins anymore. And in that era of him being the backup quarterback was fun. I loved his I don't give a crap mentality of I have the best arm in the world and I'm going to throw it into places that I may or may not be able to fit it in there. Who is the backup quarterback going to be next season? I still think it's going to be Daniel Jones. I really do. Like, I know he has a market. It sounds like hold on.
Oh, we got it. We got it. Sam Darnold, 3 years, 100 million to the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold joining the Seattle Seahawks on a 3-year, $100 million deal. I think we can snark and say a little bit that Sam Darnold did not lose a ton of money with those last 2 games. Maybe he did, but 3 years, $100 million is a really good deal for Sam Darnold. It's the right place for him to go. As soon as Geno Smith left, it made so much sense that Sam Darnold would go to the Seattle Seahawks. And this makes it official that Sam Darnold is moving on and JJ McCarthy is the future of the Minnesota Vikings. Again, Dane, if you have to run and start writing, that's okay. But
I probably will run now.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your contribution.
I'll pop
Dane
back on later tonight.
Pioneer Press. Appreciate you, man. All right. So over $100 million for Sam Darnold, who came to the Minnesota Vikings on a 1-year, $10 million contract and gave the Vikings everything he had last year. He handled the situation with JJ McCarthy being drafted, the training camp, the behind the scenes stuff incredibly well. He won over the locker room. He won over the head coach. He gave us some exciting games, exciting moments, some tremendous performances. The game against the Atlanta Falcons, beating Kirk Cousins in his return, celebrating on the sideline on the big board against Atlanta. And then when it comes to the game against Green Bay, that's the one the Vikings have lost so many times. 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, as exciting as a game as you're going to have, them beating the Green Bay Packers that night. And after the game, he's talking to Tom Brady, and then he goes into the locker room and they pick him up on their shoulders. I know what happened the next 2 weeks. And the way that it ended was unfortunate. And it so often is for every single team and every single player. If you're not Mahomes or you're not the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, and it was disappointing and it was shocking and it was frustrating to see the way that they fell apart in the last 2 games. But I don't think that should at all take away from what Sam Darnold did for the Minnesota Vikings last year. This was a team that was expected to win 6.5 games, 6 or 7. They were expected to have bad quarterback play. Once JJ McCarthy went down, a lot of the discussion was, well, that's the season for the Vikings. They're going to have to start Sam Darnold. And instead, Sam Darnold came out, played top 10 quarterback, led the team, and earned this contract with the Seattle Seahawks. He deserves all the credit in the world for the way that he performed last year for the Vikings and showing to the world that he was not a bust, that he was not one of the biggest busts, that he was put in a bad situation right out of the draft with the Jets, with Carolina. So before we get to the other part of this, which is the most significant part for the Vikings, I just want you to take a minute and appreciate Sam Darnold, because I know that right after it ended, fans were unhappy. Everybody was angry. Of course, you deserve to be. It was another meltdown, another disappointment. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you're talking about the Vikings and you're talking about the quarterbacks that they went through the years, that Sam Darnold season is going to be one that you remember very fondly through the years. And the way that he approached the situation, his personality, the way he connected with Kevin O'Connell, with Justin Jefferson, with his teammates, it was more than just kind of a rent-a-player season. It had something more special to it. So all Vikings fans should appreciate Sam Darnold going from a season that you thought was kind of going to be lost once JJ McCarthy went down to one of the more exciting regular seasons in Vikings history. So he earned this spot. He deserves to be thought of as a starting NFL quarterback, and he's going to have some challenges there with Seattle. But I also think that the Seattle Seahawks have been declared left for dead a few times, but they also are a good organization. They have organizational structure, a general manager who's built multiple winning teams. They have a good fan base. They've got a great stadium. They've got everything that Sam Darnold came to the Vikings for, and including a very good number one wide receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba. So this is the right decision for Sam Darnold. He's going to be loved and appreciated in Seattle. They're going to build around him to rebuild the roster. It appears that he got $55 million guaranteed, so more than he would have gotten with the franchise tag. And it ends up being a good deal for Sam Darnold, but they can also work around it. That doesn't seem like it's going to be restrictive. That is the part of it for him. And before we get into the other one, I just wanted to bring that up, that you should appreciate what he was able to do. And I love the redemption story of somebody who was so just screwed from the start with the way that he was brought into the league by the Jets and the Panthers. And to have a chance now to have a long career in the NFL as a good starter is a great arc for Sam Darnold. But this means for the Minnesota Vikings, it is JJ McCarthy time. JJ McCarthy is the future of the Minnesota Vikings franchise officially now. And we'll just throw out any of the Aaron Rodgers stuff. That disappeared pretty quickly. JJ McCarthy is the future of the Minnesota Vikings. And here's what this means. This means that McCarthy at this moment taking over completes the arc, the entire story, the entire plan of the Vikings when they got here. This is much more significant than just, all right, on to the next guy. Sam let him down. They drafted him, whatever. No, it's more significant than that. Because when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell arrived, they had a plan. And that plan was to eventually move on from Kirk Cousins and to draft a quarterback to build around. But they couldn't do it in 2022 because there were no quarterbacks. And they couldn't do it in 2023 because the quarterbacks were taken in the top 4 and they didn't have a pick there. So they end up with Jordan Addison. But in 2024, the football gods offered them a draft with 6 quarterbacks in the first round, historically good quarterback draft. They moved on from Kirk Cousins. They set the salary cap in place to be ready to build around a rookie quarterback. And then on draft night, they draft JJ McCarthy with having no idea really what he's going to be because he's a raw prospect. They knew about the character, they knew about the arm strength, they knew about the physical tools, but as far as his college football, he didn't play a lot of it. And when you compared that to a Drake May, to a Jaden Daniels, to a Michael Penix, to a Bo Nix, those guys had much bigger sample sizes of playing football. And they had offenses that were built entirely around them and not around running the football, as it was with Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy. And so it took McCarthy more time to get some of the footwork down, the accuracy and those things. But where he really won over this franchise as being the franchise quarterback, I think was he arrived at OTAs. He was not QB1, not even close. He was not throwing accurately. He was struggling with the footwork. He's not throwing to the right places. He's throwing some interceptions. He's overthrowing guys in OTAs and minicamp. And it was a real struggle. And then between minicamp and training camp, JJ McCarthy stayed in Minnesota. He didn't go to Cabo or wherever vacation, South Beach. He stayed in Minnesota and he put in the work. And when he returned for training camp, he was a different quarterback. And as he took step after step after step through training camp, he sold the Minnesota Vikings organization on his work ethic, his raw talent, which was more impressive to me in person than I thought it was based on what I saw in college. And this is why I always look at it as I got to see it up close to really know what is there for the raw talent. And McCarthy showed arm strength, playmaking ability, command of the offense. He was executing 2-minute drills in training camp as if he had been a quarterback for a long time. And as he was getting closer and closer, the preseason game happens. And this is what all of you ended up seeing the preseason game. He performed at such a high level, but also had to bounce back in that game a little bit. And we checked off all the boxes in the preseason game of what we had seen throughout training camp on a daily basis. And that was a major part of what sold the Vikings organization on him, was how well he would bounce back from bad practices, how the work ethic translated from, well, sure, you could say somebody's got work ethic in college, and maybe they did, but to see it at the NFL level, to see him put in the work, make the progress, and become the quarterback very quickly that they saw when they were meeting with him, saw at the combine, saw in college for the high end of it, already to see that in his first training camp, I think was beyond what they had initially expected. They had initially expected a much longer development curve for McCarthy with the way they talked about it, because on draft night, Kevin O'Connell said to us, guys, I don't want quarterback controversy. And I'm paraphrasing, but he more or less said, we're going to be patient with McCarthy. I'm not going to push him. And I don't remember when it was that he said teams fail quarterbacks more than quarterbacks failing teams, but it was along the lines of talking about JJ McCarthy and not failing JJ McCarthy. But I don't think they expected him to quickly get to where he was last year. And that's what started to sell them on him being a franchise quarterback. And then the way he played in the preseason game, they were ready to have him compete in the joint practices in Cleveland had he not got hurt. So he has the surgery, and then Darnold plays the way that he played. And it left us to wonder through 17 weeks, how can you move on from Sam Darnold when he's played this well? And let's not forget, let's not wash it all out because we know how it ended. Sam Darnold showed a lot of high-end talent throughout. And had he played much better in the playoffs, I mean, I'm thinking about right now how that one throw in Seattle, that one throw set off the Vikings playing the Rams and probably set off the Seattle Seahawks being interested in Sam Darnold and signing him to a contract here today. That one throw may have put the Vikings back on track to go with JJ McCarthy into the future. And so the fact that the plan all along was to draft a quarterback, to spend in free agency, which I know has not happened yet today, but to spend in free agency and to build this team around JJ McCarthy is now here today at this moment taking shape. And this was a plan for someone like myself who's covered the Minnesota Vikings since 2016. We have not seen this because when I arrived in 2016 to cover the Vikings for 1500 ESPN, they had Teddy Bridgewater and they had this same concept. And then Bridgewater got hurt and they ended up having to make a trade for Sam Bradford that ultimately did not turn out to be a good trade, a first round pick for a quarterback that gave them one season. And then Case Keenum. Then they spend all of it on Kirk Cousins. They limit themselves when it came to Kirk Cousins for what they could spend around him. He was also a limited physical quarterback that, as you see now in the Super Bowl, it's Jalen Hurts versus Mahomes. And in the championships, you got Josh Allen and you got Jaden Daniels. That the league was changing and the Vikings were stuck in the past with an expensive quarterback that they were just not able to build around, and he was not able to get them over the top. And during that entire period of time, we talked about the rookie quarterback contract, draft the guy, find the guy, build around that guy for years. We talked about it. I don't know how many times I said it over those years. The better plan was for the Vikings to draft a quarterback. In 2020, when they extended Cousins, I was ripping my hair out. There's options, right? There's options here. You should draft someone. There's a big quarterback draft. They didn't do it and they extended Kirk. And so all this whole time, this was the light at the end of the tunnel, was JJ McCarthy. And now we've arrived, folks. We've arrived. And even the fact that the Vikings were having a conversation about Milton Williams, it tells you how much you can spend around this player. So JJ McCarthy, I should also mention that throughout this year, JJ McCarthy didn't disappear. He didn't go away. He acted as if he was going to be QB1 behind the scenes. And Kevin O'Connell explained this, of how JJ McCarthy would each week go through the process of being a QB1, where he was in the meetings, where he's having the sit down with Kevin O'Connell each week. Kevin O'Connell was planning this to go to JJ McCarthy the whole time, and he acted like it behind the scenes. He didn't say, "You're hurt, you go sit in the corner." No, he said, "You're our franchise future, and you need to be here on a daily basis, every single day, behind the scenes, working with Sam Darnold, seeing what Sam Darnold goes through, game planning." He couldn't practice, but going through it mentally on the virtual reality, like they did everything they could to set up for this. And the final step for JJ McCarthy, and this was the thing that held me back throughout the offseason, the thing that held me back of whether they would go to McCarthy or not, was where does he stand physically? That was always the thing that held me back. And we've got some other things percolating here as well. So Darnold was the first thing to fall. It appears that Justin Fields is going to be a New York Jet, 2 years and $40 million. So Justin Fields going to the Jets. There you go. So we got some quarterback movement here. Will Aaron Rodgers be a part of it? Not to the Vikings, I don't think, but will Aaron Rodgers be a part of it? So the fact that McCarthy had all this time banked, all this knowledge banked, the last step was pretty simple. The last step was JJ McCarthy needs to get out on a football field and he's put the weight back on, and he needs to show them that they can move on from Sam Darnold. And since the end of the season, remember that since the end of the season, McCarthy just got on the field working. And they came out and they announced that to us at the end of the year press conferences, where they said, hey, he's back out on the field, so he's working out. And how that went was going to dictate it. And then when we got to the combine and they said he's gained 20 pounds, and he's good to go. And he's back and ready for the offseason program. To me, that was the last step to where they could say, okay, Sam Darnold, it's time to let you move on. And from Sam Darnold's perspective, knowing that someone else was going to love and want to marry, not date, I think was important for him. That Seattle was going to really invest in him and not just say, hey, you're sort of our guy, but sort of not. Okay, we've got some other things rolling in. Cam Bynum, I haven't seen this yet. I have not seen this yet, but I'm looking. Cam Bynum, enough of you are saying it, I'm going to believe you. Cam Bynum to the Colts. Okay. So that matches up with what we expected. It certainly matches up with what we expected, that Cam Bynum would not be coming back. Yep. Okay. Dan Graziano saying that now. Okay. So let me just, I'll get to that in a moment, but let me finish the thought on Sam Darnold leaving and JJ McCarthy taking over. There is some expectations now that will be placed on JJ McCarthy, and there is development that will be needed for JJ McCarthy. And we're going to have to now, I think, treat this a little bit more like, hey, he's going to have his moments, and it's going to be his first year starting, and he hasn't started before, and he hasn't thrown a lot of passes, but the environment that the Minnesota Vikings have already given JJ McCarthy, and the proof is in the Darnold of what Kevin O'Connell is capable of when working with a quarterback, that if JJ McCarthy can even meet a certain threshold, then he can be an above average to excellent quarterback that you can win with. And what we've seen work in terms of, we're always looking for, what's the model? How do you do it? How do you build the winning team? And what keeps coming up all the time is finding a cheap quarterback and building a freak roster around that quarterback. Now, Tom Pelissero says 4 years and $60 million. So that is $15 million a year for Cam Bynum. Hey, somebody on this podcast has been saying 15 million is the price for Cam Bynum for a while. It's almost like I had an idea that that would be what it was. Interesting. So he signs with the Indianapolis Colts. This was very clearly signified. And if you guys have thoughts on Sam Darnold to Seattle, I think that what took the pop away from that was that we already knew that as soon as Geno Smith was traded, we already knew. And as soon as Kevin O'Connell went to the podium at the combine and he said, hey, by the way, JJ McCarthy is going to be good to go for the start of the offseason program, that's when I knew that it was over for Sam Darnold in Minnesota. And then the more you played it out, he was going to have interest. There was this idea out there that I'll never understand. Oh, well, Sam Darnold cost himself so much money in those last 2 games. No one's going to sign him. What? I heard that a couple times. I check in a lot of different podcasts. I heard that a few times from NFL analysts. Made no sense to me. And yes, this does mean that the comp pick is on the way. So all of you can be thrilled about that. For next year, the comp pick is on the way. Is Javon Holland worth $18 million? That I think he is, personally, because he's been top 3 in the NFL. But this is really the thing that is, for the Vikings, they have to know already, I'm guessing they do, about whether Harrison Smith is coming back. But even if Harrison Smith comes back, I don't think that should preclude them from doing something else. 5th round comp pick for Bynum, I don't know. It depends on how much they spend. And nobody ever likes to get into that formula, but it's how much the Vikings spend. So far, yes, they would get a comp pick for that. But let's just not worry too much about the comp picks at this moment, because they'll announce them in 2026 and I'll be here for it. Maybe we'll do a comp pick special. They announced the comp picks today. But Javon Holland, if he is going to press $20 million a year, I think that it is worth it, because even if Harrison Smith returns, we're talking about 1 more year at most, right? It can't be much more than that if Harrison Smith returns. So make it work for a year with Theo Jackson. But as soon as Theo Jackson signed, and we know that they have been very high on Theo Jackson for a long time since they got him in 2022, that he would be potentially a starter here. And then if Harrison Smith comes back, that's okay. But there's other options out there like Javon Holland. And I do think that Javon Holland is the guy that's worth that type of huge payday. In this defense, safety is huge. Safety is kind of thought of as a position you can replace. But if you have that difference maker, two different times in Javon Holland's career, including once with Brian Flores, he has been a top 3 safety. There is an enormous impact if you're going to have a top 3 safety, and that is worth a lot of money. Not only that, but the Vikings still have a lot of money to spend. They have only spent what, 7.5 million on Isaiah Rodgers. That's all we've seen them spend so far. And Holland is a playmaker, he's a difference maker. So it's someone that I think they have to look at, not just having Theo Jackson back there, but it does depend. I mean, Rashawn says there's no way they're putting that into the safety position. What about Theo Jackson? Well, I mean, they didn't pay Theo Jackson a huge amount of money. They paid Theo Jackson fringe starter money for that position. And he's also a player that can do a lot of different stuff. But if you're talking about Harrison Smith leaving, Cam Bynum just left, there's still a safety spot open because I think that you want Josh Metellus to continue to play the Josh Metellus role. And that's what's most important, is that Josh Metellus is going to continue to play there. So you're going to go look and get someone like Holland. And I agree that Holland is dynamic, that he could do a lot of different things. He could play in the box. He could drop back. So that's my top target for the Vikings with Cam Bynum leaving. And let me say this as well. Cam Bynum has been one of the cooler stories behind the scenes for me to watch come to fruition. When they drafted him, he was a cornerback out of Cale. And I remember he told the story on his initial draft. We have conference calls with these guys when they get drafted. And so he told us that, I forget what they did, that he rented a house with his family next to a lake. And when he got drafted, they all ran and jumped in the lake. And so from the first day, you kind of got the sense that Cam Bynum was this enthusiastic, really smart, interesting guy. And then as he got more and more opportunity, what it started to become obvious was that he could actually play. And I remember the game in 2021 against the Baltimore Ravens where it was, I think Harrison Smith got COVID and he couldn't play. And so Cam Bynum just had to play. It's like, I'm sorry, buddy, you're in. And he ended up playing great. I think he might have had a pick in that game, but he just played really, really well. And right there was, okay, this guy on game day can be thrown into the mix and is ready to play Harrison Smith's position. And that's the type of intelligence we're talking about. And they draft a safety in Lewis Cine, having no idea what they have in Cam Bynum. He wins the job out of camp and becomes one of the more consistent players, downhill tackler, deep playmaker. And then this year really came into his own as a vibes guy, but I don't want him to be treated that way because he was a very good player for the Vikings. So $60 million for him is well earned for Cam Bynum, and a great Viking career to set himself up for this type of contract. The Bears making another move here for, is it Odenigbo? Deo Odenigbo? Is that how it's pronounced? 3 years, 48 million. So the Bears spending a lot here as they continue to improve. So the point is that Cam Bynum earned his contract, super high intelligence player, one of the guys that you want inside your building. And it was always my expectation that there was going to be a bad team that wanted to overspend for Cam Bynum because their vibes are bad. And he's going to bring great stuff to their locker room and he can make some plays. And I think it's a great deal for him. But also, it is too much for that position for the Vikings. That's just the reality of the economics of Cam Bynum. Is when you look at the numbers he produces, the production, you're probably talking about more of a mid-pack type of deep safety. If we're just doing the black and white of it, mid-pack deep safety. a good player who you love to have on your team, right place, right time, but he is not coming into the box, flying in, getting sacks, getting a lot of interceptions. And if you're going to go 15 plus million when you got to spend on guard and you got to spend on a lot of other stuff, then that's a hard amount of money to just invest in Cam Bynum. Now, if they can get someone else, now Moehrig already went to the Carolina Panthers, Trayvon Moehrig, but there are a number of other players at the safety position who you would be interested in. I've got Javon Holland at the top of my list. He was drafted by Brian Flores. Remember, the last player that was drafted by Brian Flores who came here was Andrew Van Ginkel. That worked out extremely well for them. I guess Hufanga is working on a deal with Denver, so he's probably off the list. Jeremy Chin is an interesting one. Really physically gifted Justin Reed is another one. Julian Blackman, who's from the Indianapolis Colts. He was a deep safety last year, somebody to watch. Just looking at my top 60 list. Andre Cisco, Justin Simmons. These are some other players that could be options at safety, but I think we need to know to talk about this, the information that we don't know, which is in part what Harrison Smith is doing. But I really think even if Harrison Smith comes back, Jeremy Chin, somebody else, you could do. So I'm going to go back over my list again now that we've got some answers. And thank you so much to David for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying the show. And thank you so much to the audience in general. If you're new to the show, hi, check out the newsletter, purpleinsider.football. That's one thing. Just to introduce myself, been covering the team for a long time here and have done many free agency shows throughout the year and got back, covered them at the combine and all those things that we all do. So, okay. Sorry, Tom Pelissero tweeted that Josh Metellus is going to need a new dance partner. That's funny. That is true. Jeremy Chin would be an option. But anyway, just, to introduce myself, if you guys don't know, I used to work for 1500 ESPN here in town. And then when that was no longer, I started Purple Insider. And I've been building up the YouTube channel. I've been on the podcast side for many years and the newsletter. So I'll be going to the owners' meetings, do all those types of things. And it's kind of my deal. So anyway, apparently Tyler says there's a bidding war for Javon Holland. Ooh, a bidding war. And the Vikings are in the mix. I don't know Zach Gatsby, but as far as reporting goes, but I just, when we're talking about Javon Holland, this is a real playmaker. And the Vikings at that position, I think, need that. And even though I think that Harrison Smith has been really good over the last few years, I don't think he has been the same level of a difference maker, playmaker, game-changing plays that he was in his prime. And that's just life, the age with players. He's still right place, right time. He's still a good tackler. He's still a great leader, a great communicator. He is still the coach on the field for the Vikings. But Javon Holland is 25 years old and is already twice ranked in the top 3 by PFF among safeties. He's played in his first 4 years, 3,500 snaps, so he hasn't missed a lot of time. By his PFF numbers, he was down last season on a team that was not that great for Miami. But his high end in coverage, he had 16 quarterback pressures in 2021 with Brian Flores. I think that he would be a really, really good addition. Apparently that person is not a reporter, the Zach Gatsby guy. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we know the official announcements on the show are all going to come from your Schefters and your Rappaports. But as far as your speculation goes, yeah. We can still do that when we've got certain players. So let me run through my list. And now that we have some things settled, I'm just curious about Byron Murphy. I was really, as far as this live stream goes, my plan for the day was to take a deep breath. Who could take a deep breath today? My man? You're right. I do need another Diet Dr. Pepper though. But just to let you all know, kind of my plan is I will need some food and water. I have to be fed and watered. And I think we've gotten a couple of the big things off of the list that have been accomplished. So my thought was to, you know, kind of go through, get the Sam Darnold decision taken care of, and see where a couple of other things were going to fall, and then pop back in later for another live show. And I think we're probably at 3 straight hours, approaching a good time to maybe take a break and then do another live show later. So I've appreciated. I was kind of sitting here waiting for a Byron Murphy thing, and maybe if we were going to get some news on that, or if there was a big signing, because there was the conversation about Milton Williams. So maybe there was going to be something that happened there, but we haven't had that yet. And maybe we'll let that play out a little bit. So I think that's what I'm going to do for now, is just going to call this an early live stream with a lot that's happened so far and a lot still to happen. And then, yes, you're right. As soon as I sign off, Javon Holland. And that's the thing about this day is, like, when when are these things going to break? Because then, you're saying, hey, Javon Holland's in this potential bidding war. Is he going to come to the Vikings and all those things? But you're right. Matt Fries will sign, or Will Fries. I'm Matt. Will Fries will sign, and Javon Holland. And then there will be just like so many signings that fall. But that's going to be my plan for now, is to check out for now. I'm going to grab some lunch. I'm going to write some stuff and rest the voice a little bit. 3 straight hours here. Maybe try to recruit a couple other guests. Dane Mizutani earlier did a great job. And then later on tonight, I'm thinking 6 Central. 6 Central. So that means we won't be too far separated from the rest of the stuff happening. 6 Central, I am going to create a new live stream, and we'll do that again. So hopefully you guys enjoyed all of the breaking coverage of Sam Darnold, of Cam Bynum, and the Milton Williams drama that happened there. And I'll be back later on tonight. So, and Twitter will crash again. You guys are the best. Great audience here. Great chat. Really appreciate you coming on. This will not be the end of live streaming for today. Again, later on, 6:00 tonight Central, I will be back with a recap of the day and maybe some things that are still going on. So thank you so much. I'll see you guys later. I'll see you then. Football. What a day we've got going on, folks. I'll see you later.